All right, thank you everybody for joining us. Today is January 21st, 2025. We are here for the purposes of a school board meeting of the Salt Lake City School District Board of Education. The board does have a need for a closed executive session, and I would entertain a motion now.
I'll do the motion. I motion on January 21st, 2025, I move that the board go into closed executive session to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual and pending or reasonably imminent litigation.
Second.
A motion and a second on the table. Is there any discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote starting with Bryce Williams.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Charlotte Fife Jefferson, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes. Brian Jensen, yes.
Amanda Longwell, yes.
That motion passes. We'll go ahead and enter our closed executive session room and be back by 5:30. Thanks.
Oh my gosh, that's such a good shot.
All right, thank you, everybody. Welcome back to the Salt Lake City School District Board of Education public meeting. We'll go ahead and convene that now. Today is January 21st, 2025. We're here for the purposes of a Salt Lake City School District Board of Education meeting. Our first opening items this evening, of course, we want to welcome everybody. With that, I would want to recognize our association leaders who are with us this evening or viewing online. For Buildings and Grounds, we have President Aaliyah Ocampo. For Child Nutrition, we have President Tanya Slaughter. For Transportation, we have President Chris Croak. For the Salt Lake Education Association, for SLEA, we have President Mike Harmon, Vice President Chelsea Acosta. They're both here. And for the Salt Lake Association of School Administrators, we have President Adrian Lobato. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Up next, we have the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'll go ahead and lead us in the pledge this evening. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, moving on to our next item is our recognitions. Superintendent, we have Greg Planter, the new assistant principal at Whittier Elementary. Would you like to introduce us to Greg? He's here.
Yes, actually, who do we have introducing Greg?
We can't hear you.
Logan, are you introducing Greg or is, thank you. And welcome, Greg, good to see you here.
More than happy to introduce Greg. Greg is coming to us as assistant principal at Whittier Elementary from Granite School District, where he's been very successful in helping school turnaround efforts and has already gotten off to a really good start since the beginning of the year and hear really good things. And so I just want to welcome and support Mr. Greg Planter as the new assistant principal at Whittier Elementary. So please join me.
Greg, do you want to stand up and say hello or anything?
Come on up.
Great.
If you come to the microphone, yeah.
Just that one or this one?
Either one.
Any of the four out there.
Yeah, I just want to say the word that I kept kind of reusing with Dr. Grant, with all of the interview committees that I was able to check back in with, was just excited. I'm super excited to be a part of the work that Dr. DeLeon is doing over at Whittier. It's been a lot of fun just to jump in and to make relationships, to jump into classrooms and to see the incredible work that those teachers and students are doing. So I'm going to keep being excited. That's me.
We are
Thank you.
very glad to have you, Greg. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks.
All right, up next we have Utah Outstanding High School Biology Teacher, Dr. Grant.
Candace Penrod,
Candace.
our director of science, will come up. I just want to remark on this again. We've had quite a string of board meetings where we have celebrated our remarkable teachers. So take it away, Candace.
Thank you. Hello, board. I'm happy to be with you here this evening. I'm Candace Penrod, District Science Supervisor. I'm here with my fellow colleague, Erin Capra, who works at West High School. And we are here this evening to recognize her accomplishments. The Utah Science Teaching Association recognized Erin Capra from West High School as the Outstanding Utah Biology Science Teacher for 2025. This award was given for her exemplary work in supporting and improving science education in secondary biology classrooms and in providing proven leadership across the school and the district. I have been in Erin's classroom. I've seen her at work. I've seen her engaging with students of all ability levels, and she has been an exemplary teacher in so many ways. We are very lucky to have her. Just so you know, she's also a NELS Fellow, which is a really big deal, yes. And we landed her 7 years ago, and she really has just really impacted a lot of students and teachers here in Salt Lake City School District. So it's with great honor and appreciation that I would like to recognize Erin and her accomplishments, and there is a certificate somewhere floating around that
And
is going
before
to
we get to the
materialize.
certificate,
It's okay, it's going
student
to make
school
its
board
way.
member Kalina Tekmadine wants a few words, if she
You're
can.
going to find it.
Well, as a former student of Ms. Capra's, I know firsthand how thoroughly she represents everything that this recognition stands for. I recall how our lessons were not only observational, but introspective and analytical, and they've still stuck with me, and I learned so much beyond biology that year. So thank you so much, and glad to see you receiving this.
We got a picture? Can I get a picture of you with the good-looking folks?
We squished together still, it'll be fine, so this looks great. Okay, everyone ready? 1, 2, 3.
All right, moving along in our agenda, thank you, Erin, for all of your efforts and everything you do to impact students' lives. We have our consent agenda next, and I'll entertain a motion. Oh, Charlotte.
Before we do that motion, may I say something?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to say that, to echo what you just said, she has impacted students' lives. Well, Helena, right, you are going to be majoring in biochemistry? What is your major
Yes,
in call?
biochemistry, and she's definitely responsible for developing not only an interest in science and biology specifically, but just for learning as a whole, so. Yeah.
Okay. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
I move that we accept the consent agenda as posted.
All right, is there a second to the motion?
Sorry. I don't know if it's appropriate to do it yet, but I would like to make a motion to modify that, because I would like to have to move to the discussion agenda, or the action agenda.
Well, I think we would have to go through with the first motion on the table, and then in the discussion, we can modify the
Can I just withdraw my motion?
motion.
I withdraw the motion.
Amanda, would you like to make the motion?
Thank you, Ashley. So I make a motion to approve all of the consent agenda with the exception of 2A, which is the December 3rd meeting minutes. I was not in attendance, I wasn't a board member at the time. And then number 5, the Joint Educator Evaluation Committee member request. I move that those get moved to the
Action agenda.
Thank you, to the action agenda. Otherwise, I move to approve everything else.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second on the table. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll start with a roll call vote with Board Member Charlotte Fife Jefferson.
Board Member Fife Jefferson, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed Abeid, yes.
Ryan Jensen, yes.
Amanda Longwell, yes.
Bryce Williams, yes.
All right, that motion passes. Thank you. And we'll revisit 2A in item 5 in the action agenda at the end of the meeting. Thank you. All right, moving along, our next portion of the agenda is our request to speak portion of the agenda, and I do have some guidelines that the board has asked me to read before each public comment period. The board enjoys the opportunity to hear from the public during the comment portion of its meetings. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to remind you of our board rules governing your comments. 1, the total time reserved for public comment is not to exceed 15 minutes, with all speakers or groups limited to 3 minutes. 2, the board will not allow public comments during board meetings that are slanderous, obscene, or otherwise violate state or federal law. 3, employees and/or their representatives may not use the public comment period to address issues that should be raised through existing formal communication channels or established grievance or negotiation procedures. I'd also like to explain that unless the speaker's topic is already on the agenda, state law prohibits the board from taking action on items raised during the public comment period. However, if it seems appropriate to the circumstances, I may direct district staff to follow up with the speaker on the topic discussed. Our first speaker this evening is Tessa Stewart. Thank you, Tessa.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Tessa Stewart, and I'm a parent of children here in the school district, including 2 daughters who've had Miss Capra also as a biology teacher, and she's incredible. We're really grateful to her and to the other good teachers at West High and at Bryant and at Wasatch. And I would like to begin by thanking you on the board for serving in elected office. I'm sure it is not easy, and I appreciate your willingness to serve. I'm here just to express deep concerns about what's happening with Principal Jared Wright at West High School. I'm just really troubled by this decision, by the lack of transparency surrounding the matter, and even just broader dynamics at play in the district. I strongly support Dr. Wright. As I mentioned, I have 2 students at West, and he's been a great leader. He's been a great advocate. I was just talking with someone in the audience. Everyone here today has a story of how Jared Wright has impacted their own students. He's been responsive and available. And I can't think of anyone who cares more or has been more invested or is a better advocate for those kids at West High. One point of evidence is this petition that's going around. It has 1,500 signatures. We've just been given such little information, and I understand this is a personnel issue, and the response is always these are private matters, but this is a really drastic decision. What are the underlying issues? Why don't we know anything? You've removed a beloved principal from our school, and we don't know anything. This really has fractured the community at West, and it just feels like it's been done in secrecy, and I don't feel like it's been done to protect Dr. Wright, but to protect the district. We just don't get a lot of communication. So my remarks here, and I know I'm running out of time, is twofold: how much we love Dr. Wright, and please communicate better with us. I noted on the agenda tonight, it looks like a reorganization of the district, and that seems like something of significance. It's going before the board. It can't just be done by Dr. Grant unilaterally, but we know nothing about that. The agenda comes out over the weekend, a 3-day weekend, and again, I appreciate your service on the board, but it would be great if we could get some kind of a newsletter. Here's what's coming up at board meetings. Let us know how you feel. We just don't hear much, and it would be nice to be as involved at the district level as we are with our own schools. We're the ones with children. We're the ones with children in this district and at these schools, and we just aren't getting information. So very quickly, if I can I began my remarks by thanking all of you for your public service, and I genuinely mean that. And I hope that you'll honor that responsibility by advocating and representing the interests of the voters who have entrusted you with this office. And just to reiterate, what that means to me tonight is our support of Dr. Jared Wright, and to please be more transparent and proactive in how you communicate with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker this evening is Jason Wheeler.
Yes, my name is Jason Wheeler. Thank you for the opportunity to visit with you this evening, and I echo Tessa's remarks as well. Also here to speak about Principal Wright. I have 3 kids that are at West High, 2 at West High and 1 that's graduated from West High. They love the school. And my wife, Kara, is from Nebraska. And this is relevant because I don't know how many of you watched the football game last night. I didn't. But in the 90s, Nebraska had like a really, really exceptional football team. And their coach, Tom Osborne, retired after being coached there for, I think, 30 years or something. And since then, they have fired 4 successive football coaches that they now owe over $32 million to. Looking, kind of chasing for that national championship playoff game again. And, I had no idea what a big deal football was in Nebraska until I married my wife, and her parents gifted me a Nebraska sweater, and I was walking around in Utah, and everybody was like, wow, you're a Nebraska fan. And little did I know that it was such a big thing. But where I'm going with this, I think, is obvious, and that is that West High has had multiple administrators over the last several years, and I don't think what West High needs right now is a new principal. That's not going to get West the success that that you're chasing as a school district that the board hopes for its students. West needs a principal that loves the students, that's committed to the students, that's committed to the teachers, the faculty, the staff there, that's committed to community service, that's committed to being at the late night games and the late night activities and even the stuff that's not very interesting. And I have witnessed Principal Wright at so many events supporting students, and know that you will be hard pressed in search for a new principal to find anybody that is more committed and more dedicated to that school and to this community than Dr. Wright. We obviously can only speak to what we know. I know that the board and the district are aware of things that we are not aware of as parents, and I understand that and acknowledge that. But I can speak to what I know, and that is that I know what I've seen from Principal Wright, and that he is an exceptional leader and principal of West High School. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Our next and final speaker this evening is Ran Zamir.
As you wish.
I went to the right, doesn't mean anything. Hello, my name is Ran Zamir, and I started serving on the SCC for West when Dr. Wright started as principal. For those of us who know, I have had 4 kids go through West, last one, yay. So my oldest started with Dr. Wright as his teacher. And we all know what happens to a district, to a board, to a principal, to a school when a teacher progresses and becomes principal and joins that school. There was a lot of turbulence before Dr. Wright came, with Principal Ford and the interim principal before that. And now we're back in a lot of turbulence right before when we are looking at building a new school. As an SCC member, I can attest we've seen progress year over year through COVID in attendance, in graduation rates, in college acceptances, which are amazing, all of you that know the population at West, and seeing more and more college applications and acceptances. There are always reasons. We're not privy to personal reasons, and we understand due process. As an SCC, we were not aware of any due process before we got the abrupt notice. There's also due process before as well as after. And we ask that the board, the district, share more with us. We've had board members at our SCC meetings. We've had district representatives come, and it has been the same modus operandi when we're told we can't say anything. It's hard for us as a group, as an SCC, which are responsible to approve trust lands, to review and provide you recommendations on safety, on the safety plan, the communication plan. We have a lot to do, and we're really worried that this move is taking West backwards. The way the move was done, when we speak to teachers, when we have teachers who participate on the SCC, who would want to become the next principal of West if this is how principals are disposed? And we hope they're not. We really, really, really want to understand better so we can be better parents of our kids at West, so we can be better SCC members. But it starts with better communication and a process. A process is not only one that serves the need of one constituent like the district. A process also has to serve the needs of the parents, the board, and SCC and other groups that support the board's endeavors. It is so hard when we look at the progress. When we look at a person that every day would be at West, every night would be meeting with us. So it's hard for us to understand how that could be thrown away, especially at a time when the school is back on track and we're going to a rebuild of the whole school. So we implore you, reinstate or bring back Dr. Wright to West. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. That concludes our request to speak portion of the agenda this evening. We'll move on to our discussion agenda. The first item there is board member reports on the Utah School Board Association State Conference that we had in the first week of January. This is something that board members we've discussed over the years, just a simple, what is your number one kind of highlight or thing that you would want to report out on based on your participation in the event? I know not everybody was there for personal or family reasons as well, but if board members do want to take that time, that would be really awesome to hear. Bryce?
Yeah, there were a number of sessions that were available at the conference. I think the session that stood out to me the most was actually the session that our student board member participated in. For the public to note, there are a number of districts that do have student board representatives, and then actually probably more that do not. What we were able to see is just the different structure. Some districts have one student board member like we do, others have two. Some other districts have a student advisory council where a number of student representatives discuss issues that are pertinent to the school. I was particularly interested in this session because back in April of last year at the National School Board Association, I actually went to a session on this with a school out of Oregon, and I was very intrigued by the Student Advisory Council and having more student voices represented in happenings in the district. One of the things I can't remember who I was talking to now. Maybe it was Dr. Grant, I don't know. But I actually think it would be something to consider in maybe having two student board members. Moving forward, we have another seat here at the table. And just something, I know we can't make any decisions on that tonight, and it probably needs further discussion, but very interested in adding student voices to district decisions and really thinking about that student advisory council model.
Thank you, Bryce. Anybody else want to report out on? Charlotte?
Yeah, I too was really impressed with that presentation and was really excited about how we can better utilize our student school board members and get them more involved and have them, for instance, one student was doing a podcast to let her school know what's going on with the district. So just, I think more information is better, and I think that would be great coming from a student, the student rep. I also enjoyed the timing of the convention because, I'm a new board member and I have so much to learn. So it was really great to learn a lot about different topics, special ed and legislative things that are coming up, with having to do with public education. And we got to talk to or hear from Governor Cox's new advisor on education. What is his name again? Yeah, Rich Nye. So that was enlightening and good to hear. And he gave us all his contact info, phone number and email, and so,
Call him up.
I know, right?
Thank you, Charlotte. Amanda or Ashley, Brian? Helena?
So going back to the student panel that I was at, I think, I also served on the state student advisory council, and I think it's really interesting because, I think I know everything when it comes to being a student in Utah, but when you talk to people from other districts and stuff, it's really interesting to see the differences that they have. For example, online school is totally different in other districts, and just little things like that where you don't even know what you don't know. And that would be really interesting to see even within our district, what little things that I might not know. Especially if we're discussing making student board member selection rotational throughout the schools, this might be another way to utilize that, so that I guess we wouldn't have to worry about that by having multiple members. And if we did have an SAC, then it could be appointed members or just interested students to open it up to more voices.
Thank you, Helena.
happy to share something. The best presentation I attended was about our budget, and our business administrator did perform 5th place in a Kahoot, a highly competitive Kahoot. And I would suggest that for those who've never had a chance to serve on the finance committee or have questions about our budget, as we enter the budget cycle, you might want to consider emailing the superintendent or BA from Cache School District who presented that, because the questions are incredibly informative and show how much information you may be missing from our budget and how it could influence you in the budget cycle. The second thing I'd clarify is we're going to receive a lot of questions about the legislative cycle and, the legislative session. And I think one thing important that happens at USBA is that it's the first meeting of the Joint Legislative Committee. And for those listening, the Joint Legislative Committee is a committee of the School Boards Association and the Superintendent's Association that convenes every Friday to discuss bill files. And so by default, our board as members would have the position that USBA has on a certain bill. So if there are bills that you're interested in, it's helpful if you send messages to us about those before Friday so we can inform the discussion that happens in JLC, and also that often you may not hear us take a position on a specific bill here, but it's because in those meetings on Friday, our representative from a shared region, Jennifer Partridge, who's in the Provo School District, she'll represent us with those votes, and USBA and USSA then lobby on behalf of those causes. So you may not hear as much legislative discussion in our regular board meetings, but it doesn't mean we're not involved in the bills that impact public education, and it may be helpful for the public listening or for people in the audience to understand how that process works, where all school boards convene with certain representatives to make decisions about what bills to support, what bills to oppose, and what bills to remain neutral on. So again, if you have feedback, you're more than welcome to email us, certainly, because we represent you in education, also your state senator and House representative. But if you do that at a certain time of the week, it helps us to kind of advocate for those decisions with our region rep.
Amanda?
I'm going to follow up with what Ashley was commenting on. She and I were kind of talking about this a little bit, but this basically ditto to what she said, but to add on, for the public members that are feeling very strongly against or for bills that may be helpful or harmful to our district, our teachers, our students, you can also advocate for or against those directly with the legislature. And the more voices that do that, the better, versus just leaning on us and USBA, et cetera, to do that. So if you need help knowing how to navigate that and how to start that conversation, definitely reach out. The accounting piece, I believe I made it through to the similar session on the budget, and there was a point made in there where there was kind of a friendly audit with the school secretaries to kind of just help them make sure that they are learning how to do their books or kind of tweaking it. I don't know how we're doing it in our district, but it was a really interesting, friendly way that was done to kind of help expand their knowledge base. And of course I went to the special education one, because even though I've been talking special education for years, you can always learn more. So it was really good. It was really informative.
Thank you, Amanda. Brian?
Thank you. First, Ashley, you covered JLC very well, and I was going to take a minute and just share that with you. For the last 2 years, I was a voting member of JLC, and if we're speaking to the public, that really is valuable if you will express your concerns about different pieces of legislation so that it can be advocated for in those JLC meetings. Then I would go on to say, being on that USBA board, it's really great to hear that it was providing you with classes that were beneficial. The USBA board worked on that for a year, to provide those sorts of classes. And I think that those presenters that you were hearing from are really highly qualified, and some of them do it, nationally and things like that. So thank you for being there. I think that it's really important that we do attend. I mean, that, to me, that's one of our responsibilities, is to get that professional development. It helps us be more effective board members. So thank you for that. For me, the classes that I thought were beneficial, there was a class on the legal issues that we will be faced with in the coming year. And I thought that that was very, very beneficial. It also ties in with JLC to some extent, but it also is looking at it on a broader scale with cases that have been determined by the Supreme Court and appellate courts that will have an impact on aspects of education in the state of Utah. So for me, that was very beneficial. Then, Charlotte, you have already talked about the opportunity that we had to speak with Richard Nye, the governor's educational advisor. I think it is really remarkable that the governor chose Richard Nye as his advisor. I mean, this is an individual with incredible credentials who served as the superintendent of the Granite School District for a number of years and successfully guided that district, but who is, if I were to think of a spokesman for education, whispering in the governor's ear, that's who I would want. Finally, I appreciated that class on special ed as well, because I'm not as familiar with it. So I appreciated the comments that you provided in that session. Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks, Brian. And Mohammed, I know you were in St. George at a soccer tournament with your kiddos. I'm sorry, I won't call on you, unless you have something you want to add based on previous experiences.
It was very cold when I was there. Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. You know, all of the things that were highlights for me have already been spoken, so I'll be brief, but the student board member session that I went to, that Helena was a part of in the Q&A, and just seeing the different variations and models, you know, I think all the things that Bryce, you know, touched on in Charlotte, I would echo and agree with are things that we could and should be looking at, like student advisory councils across this district, and maybe the second board member, and how to incorporate Helena and student voice into our work more. And then the special ed one as well was super, super beneficial. It was just an opportunity for me to sharpen my knowledge after all these years, learn some new things, and also, you know, I thought they just gave a great presentation on the role of a board member, not only in special ed cases and special ed engagement with the district, but just at being a board member in general, boundaries and liabilities, you know, things that we need to be looking out for, and then of just the overall spirit of inclusion and equity. I thought was really powerful in that session that we went to. So, Dr. Grant or B.A. Kearsley, anything that you would like to share based on your experience too, since you attended with us?
I'll go first.
Okay.
So as part of this USBA meeting, we also hold our UASBO meeting. And we UASBO, Utah Association of School Business Officials. So in the presentation there, we had a presentation from the legislative fiscal analyst. And you know, we've been hearing this in the press as we start this legislative session, which starts today, that it's going to be a lean revenue year. They're expecting more and more of education, but it seems like the focus is going to be on tax cuts versus allocating additional resources to education. So I just kind of want to throw that out there as a setting the expectation of what's to come over the next 45 days and how it will affect us and our budgets going forward. I also enjoyed, you know, I was way behind in the Cahoots game, but I made some gains there near the end and almost got on the podium. But it's always interesting and informative to hear what other districts do with their budget and how they maybe look at things a little bit different, so you can, you know, kind of say, how can we apply this in our process as well?
The sessions you named were the same ones I was going to name. I appreciated that Amanda was encouraging us to the special education session, particularly because it took the look from the board's perspective about how to manage that and how to see special education as a board member, which is different than how I look at it as a superintendent, how our director of special education looks at that, the work our teachers need to do in the classroom. So appreciated that session. I would like to take up, Bryce, as you suggest, the look at adding another board member and considering that there were a lot of good reasons why on that one. I also appreciated that the board member is part of the high school government, wherever they're from, and that has some real value in connecting and hearing from other students in the school, as well as having a voice in that and being able to share back and forth. I always find with conferences that there's a few highlights in the sessions, and then there are others that I forget what they were about. But the meaningful part to me is spending time with colleagues, particularly, having time in between the meetings with other superintendents across the state, certainly talking about the legislative session that's coming up and what's facing districts across the state. But that time together to share, as Alan said, what different districts are doing, how we're all facing such similar challenges and can share so much that way. So that is particularly valuable.
Thank you, Dr. Grant. Charlotte, looks like you, something else you wanted to add?
I wanted to mention that I was really inspired by the keynote speaker. He's a member of the Piano Guys, so he was the cellist of the Piano Guys. Stephen Sharp Nelson? But he was very engaging, but also he talked about how to avoid burnout, how he as a performer has to avoid burnout. And I think our teachers, our board members, our district staff, we can all, this will help. It's to remember the why, to remember our why, and to connect with others. There were a few things, and have meaningful relationships and connect with others that help you do the work and remember your why.
Thank you, Charlotte. And thank you, board members, for thinking about those highlights. I think to the public, this is just our effort to let you know that we're attending these awesome professional development opportunities, and that we're taking things back and we're seeing how they can apply to the work that we do that benefits not only our schools, but our students and our community for the better. So thank you for allowing us the time to do that. We'll move on to our next discussion agenda item, which is our board meeting structure. Board members, as you know, there was a doodle poll that was generated and sent out within the last week that we've all had the chance to fill out, and ideally we have some results. I believe that, is Tiffany going to share the results with us, or are we just, because I don't have the final results. I know we were waiting on a couple other folks the last couple of days.
We just got our final 2 sets of results in tonight. This will not be pretty. This is going to be just raw right out of the Microsoft Forms. But we had everybody respond, thank you. And what we asked were if you would, please, is that big enough that you can see it from where you are? To rank the options for board meetings and study sessions that were outlined in the January 7th meeting. And we asked you to put your most preferred option at top. So what this shows is that the first choice for almost everybody was to do 2 business meetings a month with any study sessions scheduled to begin at 4 o'clock before. That was the most popular choice, with the second. You see how the pattern goes. It just goes down from there. As we look at then some of the possibilities, because ranking is one piece, but if we can't get people, if our board can't attend, we can't do that option. So each one of these had the extremely somewhat possible option, or a difficult, or just a flat out, I could not make that work with my life or my world. So how possible would it be for you to attend a board meeting beginning at 4 p.m.? 4 out of 7 people said that would be extremely possible. 2 people, somewhat possible. 1 person would be somewhat difficult, but everybody could make that happen. Nobody said that was not possible. The next option was, how possible would it be to study this, to attend a study session at lunch during the week? And again, kind of broken up here in the same types of categories. 2 people could 100% make lunch options work. 3 people, that would somewhat be possible. Nobody said it was really difficult, but for 2 people, that would not be a possible option. And, just as a reminder, this is, when we talk about study sessions, those more informal sessions where you have an opportunity to talk or maybe to walk around or to have some people come in and talk about different sorts of things. So we'd also looked at, well, could we do that on a Saturday? What would that look like? Nobody said that was extremely possible. Nobody's favorite option, but for some people, 3 people, somewhat possible, and then 2 people, somewhat difficult, and then 2 people for whom that would not be a possibility. And then attending for a whole day, that was a suggestion made, thinking about how maybe some rural districts do things that have to drive very far. That's a way that they will sometimes conduct their board meetings. So 2 people, extremely possible, 2 people, somewhat possible, and 3 people said that that would not be possible for them to do a full day session. We had some additional comments, and I'll be happy to share those with you. They are not marked by names, but those are the comments. We asked if there were any additional comments, and that is the overall. I will take the final, now that we have all 7 responses, and PDF this and send it to everyone and attach it to the minutes so that you have the final and complete form, but that is the overall look that we have. Is there anything that you need to see again or questions that you have before I sit down? Take this away.
I personally don't, and maybe we could start the discussion. Brian?
I'm wondering, Tiffany, if you could just read the comments, because what I have in mind, I just have 5 of them, and I can't really see.
Oh, okay.
It would just.
There were only 5 people who made a comment.
Oh, okay,
So-
so then we do have,
Yes.
what we have received, there aren't any additional comments?
No,
other than
there were 5 comments, but
Okay.
we do have all 7 board members'
Okay, all right.
data. Thank you. That's a great clarification.
Thank you, Dr. Hall, for being the keeper of the data on this one.
You bet. I'll get that over to you in the PDF.
Appreciate it. So I'm actually gonna kind of start the conversation with you, Board Member Anderson, if that's okay, to see if this survey, I know you recommended that the interim first step would be to conduct, a survey or a doodle poll like this, before we made, significant changes to the meeting structure.
Yeah, I think the survey shows that we definitely don't need an ad hoc committee, that it comes to a pretty clear conclusion, which is that we should resume the practice of study session prior to the meeting, seeing that everyone said it is possible, and one person may have some degree of difficulty. But given that it's not every meeting, it also seems reasonable.
Right. Great, thank you, Ashley. Are there any other comments to the meeting structure and the results that we are seeing?
Wait, it would not be every meeting? That was just a clarification. Oh,
Just as needed.
just as needed, okay.
Well, and typically, as we do it now, we have one of our meetings that is a business meeting and the other that is a study session, but with business items. So what this would mean is that that study session would be conducted prior to the business, eliminating some of the confusion. And my only other comment would be, if we do proceed to move forward in that direction, as Dr. Hall pointed out, study sessions are intended on some level to be more informal and allow for the kinds of discussions that we haven't been able to have. So I'd also recommend that we continue to conform with all the public requirements of study session, and anyone's welcome to listen, but we consider using also an alternative space or configuration of this space that is more conducive to the actual intent of what a study session is.
Exactly, thank you for clarifying that. Amanda?
I'm actually missed the first slide, and I was trying to, scroll back. My biggest thing is, and it's repetitive, but ultimately ensuring that every single meeting, it's set up in a way that we can take things to action and make decisions instead of being held to only being able to make those decisions one time per month, because it slowed down the decision-making doing it the other way. So I just strongly am asking for that to be the ongoing or the future structure.
I'll go ahead and speak up too, and I agree with you. I think when we switched over, I think there was an honest attempt to kind of separate the two, but the nature of our work is one where we sometimes had to be making decisions on study session meeting times, right? And so I think this gives us a good opportunity to still conduct the business of the board and the district, while also being able to schedule study sessions on important topics that we need to discuss, and strategize on how we bring them to a business meeting or a more formal decision process. Any other comments? Brian?
Well, I've just been trying to keep track of all of the minutes,
Oh.
all of the time and everything. I'm,
Yeah, yeah.
new at that part, but I did want to interject. I think it's really positive to see that the board recognizes that a study session is valuable, and it's valuable to have 2 business meetings so that we're able to accommodate what you're talking about as well, Amanda, because in those business meetings, we can move things to action and those sorts of things. I think that this is getting back to a productive way to be able to address all of the needs of the district, whether it's looking at something and studying it specifically or addressing a business matter that has to be done in a timely way. So thank you all for figuring out that. I mean, wow, don't you think that's kind of great that, you know, in a doodle poll, we were able to say, we're going to make this work.
Yes, thank you, Brian. If there's no other comments, I
I
would
have one
entertain.
question.
Okay.
I'll say what motion you want to entertain first, and I'll say my
Oh,
last comment.
I was just gonna say, I would entertain a motion regarding
To-
board meeting structure.
To
move the
approve a board
action.
meeting structure with, oh, you want to move it to action?
Yeah, that's kind of.
Okay, I'm going to ask my last question, and then I'll move to
Before
move
you
it to
ask
action.
it, just keeping in mind our guidelines, if anybody wants to speak in the first round, we're gonna jump to the second. So Ashley, you'll have 2 minutes in the second round.
Okay, my only question is, when do you intend to begin this practice? So for instance, this morning in agenda setting, we discussed the need for a study session on a specific topic, but we only agenda'd 2 business meetings. Are you suggesting that we would move that study session to 4 PM for one of those meetings and proceed?
Yeah.
So we would update the board on that?
Yeah, I would suggest that if we adopt this tonight, that would be what we do for February and moving forward.
Okay, perfect. So with that, I move that we send the proposed meeting structure for study sessions to the action agenda.
I second.
Okay. Let me just make my notes here. And Charlotte second. All right, is there any, so I have a motion from Ashley to move this to the study, or to the, excuse me, to the action agenda, with a second from Charlotte. Is there any discussion to the motion? All right, seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote, starting with Board Member Anderson.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed Bid, yes.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Amanda Longold, yes.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Charlotte Fife Jefferson, yes.
Great, that motion passes. We'll revisit this on the action agenda. Okay, moving along, we have our board committee assignments. Sam, do you mind popping up the document that we've been working with? So while that's populating, just so you all know from the public and from the board, Vice President Jensen and I, we met after our last board meeting to kind of, you know, draft, so to speak, folks into certain positions based on our discussion and based on a few kind of, you know, precedents, you know, making sure that there is somebody, in focusing on the policy and the finance committee, making sure that there was somebody on both of those committees who had previously been on that committee for continuity's sake. Otherwise, we did our best to kind of fill this out based on people's interests. We know that we still need to fill out the USBA delegates and assembly, all of that stuff, but we ironed that out during the USBA conference that we were just at. But nonetheless, Sam, do you mind kind of scrolling up on that so we can kind of see where we're looking at? So Board Policy Committee, we're recommending that.
Oh, gosh. Here's my timer.
I feel you, Brian.
Guys.
Just give us a second.
At least it has a nice vibe.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Does the timer get a time limit?
Almost.
Okay. Oh, there we go.
Cool. Thank you, Bryce. For the board policy.
Thank you.
Committee, we have recommended Brian Jensen to remain there. Bryce Williams would be a remaining member as well, and adding Charlotte Fife Jefferson to that. Based on our previous conversation, we all more or less agreed that the board handbook committee, ad hoc committee, would be part of, it would be the same committee as the policy committee. For charter school boards, we are recommending that we let that one go from board assignment, being that there aren't responsibilities outlined in either of the charters that we have. Alan?
And I just want to comment that the two charters that are chartered by the district don't have boards. This is the board of those two charter schools.
That's what I was getting at. So we've recommended to eliminate that. The board finance committee, Ashley Anderson would be our remaining continuity member. I would join that committee along with Amanda. If you scroll up again, Sam, for us. Human sexuality, we would have Bryce and Charlotte. Representatives to city council meeting would be board leadership with me and Brian, and Ashley, who's kind of representing, we've been going back and forth on the name, but right now we've kind of settled on tax increment financing committee. So as the representative, one of the representatives to that, would participate in those meetings with the city council and the mayor. Tax increment financing committee, we've proposed Charlotte and Ashley. The Ed Foundation board, again, has traditionally been board leadership, at least in my experience, and then Bryce, through his recommendation, would like to continue to participate in that. So we felt like that was a good thing after talking with the superintendent, who also talked with James, our Salt Lake Education Foundation director, who also agreed that that would be more than welcome. Relative to our Salt Lake County recreation appointee, Ashley, you expressed interest in that in our last meeting, so we've added you there. And then for traffic, safety, and transportation, we have Mohammed and Amanda, and for our wellness committee, we also have Mohammed and Amanda.
Oh my gosh.
Thanks, Brian. So that's the makeup as we have it. I would open it up for discussion to see how folks feel about it. Bryce?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. I don't have any heartburn. I know it takes a lot to make considerations with who board leadership wants to put in these various committees. One thing I would like to share, and maybe, I just want to say it for public record, and maybe it comes up again in 2 years, is I have been on the policy committee for almost 4 years now and have not had an opportunity to be on the finance committee. Again, I don't have any heartburn with it, but I would like that opportunity maybe in 2 years, if we could just put that on the record. I know I was the holdover the last 2 years ago on the finance committee, but just, I'm cool with it. I'm not gonna, I appreciate it, but just want to state that maybe in 2 years I could have that opportunity for the remainder of 2 years of my current term.
Thanks, Bryce. Ashley?
I have a comment and a question, and the first is about the Salt Lake County Rec. I know Charlotte was also interested in doing that, but expressed there may be a conflict of interest, so I thought perhaps we could pursue that conversation to see if she wanted to do it, because my other question about the TIF committee is simply that we've typically extended the finance committee to hold those meetings, so we've held finance, and then 2 finance committee members have stayed as the designees. So I'm certainly happy for Charlotte to do it. We would need to reconsider what our practice is, but I didn't know if Alan had opinions on that you may want to solicit offline as you continue to finalize this.
Thank you, Ashley. Charlotte, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I had realized that I don't know if this is a conflict of interest, but my sister works for the county, so in the mayor's office, so I don't know if that's a conflict of interest or not. That would be a question for Christina, but I don't have my heart set on that. But, so you usually have your finance committee meeting and then go straight into but then one person leaves? Okay.
And it doesn't matter either way. I'm just saying, maybe
Okay.
that's something we talk about and make sure, that we revise how we're doing it, because of course I'm happy to do that with anyone I'm happy to talk with tax increment financing with any person.
I
Any
really
person
would
will-
like to learn more about it, and am interested in it, so I'm happy with that assignment.
Amanda?
Well, I was just going to say, if Charlotte wasn't dead set on it, it would be lovely to be part of it, I am on the finance committee, and it seems like they do tie in. But again, I'm not going to wrestle you for it. If you really are passionate about it, I can wait my turn.
Alan? Oh, Alan and then
Well,
Cheryl.
and I'll just say, as part of the budget, and we can even do it sooner if wanted, we can do a presentation on tax increment financing for the full board, just to kind of go through the basics of what that is and how it affects the Salt Lake City School District.
I had a question about the city council. Could you scroll down just a little bit, please, Sam? So representatives to city council meetings. And are these, will you be going to the CRA meetings?
No, this is
No.
a meeting that consists of our board leadership, the Tax Increment Finance Committee representative, which has historically been Ashley over these last couple of years, with the chair and the vice chair of the city council, and the mayor and the mayor's liaison to the school district, Jennifer Newell.
Okay.
And so it's not, a meeting that they would normally be hosting with us, but more of a private meeting between leaderships to talk about things that we have common interests in and decisions that we might need to make collectively.
Okay. Well, it almost makes sense for that committee, those representatives to also be on the tax increment financing committee. I mean, because they're related and, I don't know.
Yeah. No, I hear where you're going
I'm
with
sure
it,
you
and
have your reasoning.
I think based on my experience too, Ashley's attendance is quite strong when it comes to those TIF committee meetings and of course, with the council meetings that we do have. And so I think you're there more or less, as a team with Ashley, but Ashley would take that first kind of role, so to speak, in the hierarchy between the two of you. If that makes sense, to attend those meetings, and then if she is unable to attend, then we would invite you in her absence. That's how that would work, because we can't have 3 meetings, we can't have 3 board members or 3 city council members, otherwise that would violate the Open Public Meeting Act.
And you usually have the president and the vice president?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
We're happy to make changes if you.
I don't know. I mean, I'm gonna be, oh yeah, so you're on the finance committee. I will be on the policy.
So if you're open to letting me take your TIF spot, I'll trade you a traffic safety or a wellness committee.
I'm happy with this, but we could, let's see, what is the assignment, 1 year?
2.
No, the tax increment financing is 1 year, it says. What?
That's how often you meet, I think, right?
Oh, once a year? Is that what that is?
That when needed is kind of taking over the 1 year.
Oh, this is not the term, this is how often you meet.
Right.
Okay.
They're all 2-year terms, and then that's kind of.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Well,
No,
we can arm wrestle over it.
No, no, you keep it. All done. If you're interested in it, you keep it. I'm not gonna.
I am.
Good.
Okay.
Seeing that there aren't too many changes to the list, the other thing that we were talking about in our last meeting is potentially eliminating a few of these committees, just based on, our participation not being relevant relative to, statute or written into certain bylaws of certain committees or groups. So I would like to revisit that as well. It was my understanding, and of course we kind of did that with a couple of these, like with the charter school boards and the ad hoc board policy handbook committee. But nonetheless, there was a couple more. Obviously, we also talked about the Salt Lake County Recreation, but being that there was, some motivation and some, desire to continue with that, I think it was transportation and wellness were the other two committees that we were looking at, and human sexuality. So does the board want to weigh in on those committees as well? And maintaining them or letting them go? And Sam, if you could scroll up a little bit so we can see, or down, sorry. Thanks. Ashley?
My question just remains the same, that I think it's fine to keep them. I think the broader question that I expressed in the last meeting is simply, if there is not a role for board members, in the committee, what is the welcoming practice of a board member attending a committee? Because what I expressed is, these committees, but also other issue areas where we've not established a committee, like sustainability, there's still been a lot of interest in board member participation, so that some board members are more aware of what's going on in our schools. So I've never heard anyone that they would like to hear less from the board or see the board participating less. So I think it's a reasonable practice to continue these things. I think the question is, what is the practice of board member attendance, or how we are welcomed into any committee where we're being invited by staff members or faculty members to attend and participate.
And I have maybe just a question about whether it would be appropriate for, with the Traffic Safety and Transportation Committee, if we had board members, I know there are ad hoc meetings being held when there are safety issues around specific schools. Would that, maybe they could, I don't know if they want to invite board members, but maybe that could be a substitution for the committee instead, just to invite board members from those areas to come and be on that ad hoc committee.
Yeah, I think that would be an invitation from probably whoever is running those ad hoc committees to the superintendent or from the city in this case, but probably to board leadership and administration, and then we would make those assignments as needed. Is kind of my thinking on that. But I'm also hearing from the board just generally that we would more or less like to keep these committees and not eliminate any others that we have already identified. Brian, is that your take as well?
That's what I'm hearing, is that.
Okay. So it seems like there aren't any substantive changes to the roster, and I think we could adopt this tonight if we wanted to, or just move forward as we need to. I don't know if we need to formally adopt it, but it never hurts to, just to make sure that we're doing our due diligence.
I move that we send the board committee assignments to action.
Before we do that, can we just go look quickly at that USBA and just clarify that? I sent out an email to you where I was trying to explain that Jennifer Partridge is now our USBA representative. And, okay, if you look at that, and it's probably hard for you to see, but in that first box, it says USBA Region 7. That's the region we are now in, because we're not a single district region anymore. We're in a multi-district because of our student enrollment. So we are now in Region 7. And Jennifer's understanding, Ashley, was that, okay, the region has 2 delegates to the delegate assembly, and that you are going to be one of those delegates, okay? So I think that we can put in that space that Ashley Anderson and Alan, I think that you were the one that was helping make the changes in that. So could you say U.S. Region 7 Delegate Assembly Representative? And then Ashley?
That fit on one page.
Okay, okay. Okay.
Assembly delegate,
Yeah, there you go, Assembly Delegate.
USBA Region 7 Assembly delegate.
Okay, then that next box, it says USBA delegate assembly, but that's where every district gets to have, in those multi-district, they get to have a delegate, okay? And my understanding was that you had, Charlotte, was it you that, do you remember when we were in that meeting? Okay. All right, so is it Nate and Bryce? Because, okay, because Jennifer didn't have notes on that. So I'm just trying to have it be, I mean, we were there, but I just want to make sure that we got it. So it's Nate and Bryce.
And then
Okay, and then everyone is going to be an alternate.
if we
Okay.
can go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I think that settles the roster. We can make those changes and certainly have them present in our minutes when we produce those. That'd be awesome. And Ashley, do you want to go ahead with your motion?
Yeah, I won't say what we're amending until it's on action, meaning like what needs to be added between now and then, but I will simply move that we send the board committee assignments to the action agenda.
I'll second.
All right, we got a motion and a second on the table. Any further discussion to the motion? Seeing, oh, it was Bryce. Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote, starting with Board Member Baker.
Harm debate, no.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Amanda Longwell, yes.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Charlotte Fife Jefferson, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes. All right, we'll revisit that on the action agenda as well. Moving along to the board calendar in our discussion agenda. That's our next topic. We could pull that up. Enlarge it, perfect. All right, so we, there they are, perfect. Thank you, Sam and Alan. We wanted to kind of clarify the board meetings calendar over the next couple of years. This is kind of the importance of what we do and just kind of scheduling things out. There's a couple of things that former Vice President Williams and I had presented before the beginning of the new year, where we decided to wait, one of those being a potential all-day retreat that the board would have in June. And then I know Brian and I have been talking in our new leadership team here that there's value in having some training, professional development that we'd like to propose to the board as well, and potentially scheduling that in this discussion tonight. But those are the two lingering things that I think were really important. Then, of course, just making sure that our November 6th meeting, our November 6th meeting in '24 doesn't fall on an election night, if there is one. I don't believe that there is.
25?
25, sorry, where?
So this,
Oh, it's not there.
this is not displayed yet, so if we go to the next one.
There,
Oh.
okay. 25, November 4th, making sure that that's not an election night. We've tried to avoid having school board meetings on those types of nights, so just keeping those things in mind. When I looked, I didn't think that it was, but I could be wrong.
Nate?
Yes.
I don't have anything specific to those particular items. I do have a question on the July 8th meeting. I know that there's a typical trend on the day of the month that they occur. However, July 8th is right after a holiday. Can we move it to the following Tuesday so that it's kind of buffered from the July 4th and the July 24th holidays? That would be my request.
I don't see why we couldn't. If that's something that you want to, you're proposing it, so let's keep that on the table for sure. But it is really close. You're right about that.
So July 8th, the very first month for this following calendar year, that's like
Right after the July 4th weekend, so let's move it one more week.
To move that to the July 15th.
I think that's the following one, yeah.
Amanda, can you repeat that in the microphone? Thank you.
I was always told I was a loudmouth as a kid. Basically, the July 8th, 2025 board meeting currently falls on the Tuesday following the weekend of July 4th. So it's a holiday weekend where most people are wanting to enjoy their holiday weekend. So having a board meeting right after it would be kind of hard for, I think, everybody in this room, including all of us. So bumping it one more week, and then that also gives us a buffer from the July 24th holiday as well, so people can enjoy their holidays and not be fretting so much about the board meeting.
That's good. Thank you.
So just looking at the Salt Lake County website, they do have listed a municipal general election day on November 4th.
Hmm.
Yeah. So it might be wise
Let's move that.
to push that to the next week as well.
We have put it either on a Monday or on a Wednesday
Yeah.
that same week.
Bryce?
I was going to make a comment on that Monday, Wednesday practice that we've had in the past. This is a personal thing, so I can try to work around it, but I'm going to be teaching on Wednesday nights moving forward in the fall. So if we do move it to a different day of the week, I'd prefer Monday or a different day.
Okay, so far what I'm hearing is two recommendations to move the July 8th meeting to July 15th and to focus our first meeting in November to be on November 3rd.
Monday, November 3rd.
Any discussion or thoughts on an all-day retreat in our June meetings?
Okay, because
Can we go
initially,
back to the previous
Page
there's-
there.
Thanks, Sam.
Oh, there. Brian?
one of the things that I was concerned about was we have new board members, and I wanted you to be able to see these dates so that you could, start populating your calendar or whatever. We had a conversation about having a board retreat on June 17th. That is not going to work for me. I don't know where the other new board members are. But when you bring up an all-day, it would need to be a different day than the 17th. I wouldn't be able to do it. I wouldn't be able to do a retreat on that day.
Would a Saturday be an option for an all-day retreat?
Yeah.
I've been on other boards where those are typically done on a Saturday, given the length
Yes.
and our personal
That's
lives.
a good idea.
So I think, and Brian, would the 21st be out of the realm of possibility as well, based on your conflict for the 17th?
Sorry, I was using the restroom. I've already indicated via email that I cannot do Saturdays in June, but I would also encourage that we solve this the same way we solved the last problem we had, which is send a survey about it instead of using board meeting time.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And revisit this at our next meeting? Cool, let's do that. And we'll populate suggestions that have already been made and present that to you all as well. All right, we'll move on. Our next agenda item this evening is elementary ELP. Superintendent.
We are going to have Tiffany and Alex come up here to present for us.
Excellent, thank you.
I was just going to say, can we sit down, please? Yes.
I'm really, really
I was,
That's what they're on.
I was gonna be a sport. You
can each have your own microphone there and
Oh my
everything.
gosh, this is luxurious.
Just pull that over if you like.
I just like to point out that Mr. Quant's touched my computer now.
Do you need me to go grab mine? And we'll make sure Sam doesn't touch mine.
Yes.
No offense. Here, I'll go grab mine.
It's fine.
This one.
It completely reprinted itself. Delightful. Thank you. You know how sometimes you have too many tabs open and you think it's your mind, but it's actually a computer? I think that's where I'm at right now. Okay. Now I have two of these. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Would you like me to wait another minute before we get started for everybody to return, or?
Keep going.
Charge. Okay, very good. We are very excited to be here to give our annual report on our gifted and talented programs in the Salt Lake City School District. I have Dr. Alex Parsons here, who is our supervisor over this program and who has done remarkable work in a year and a half, 2 years? How long have you been here?
I'm rounding out my third year.
This is third. Wow.
Yeah,
Time
I know, I
flies
know,
when you're having
I
a
know.
good time.
Whoever said
So,
wow.
yeah.
When I ask people, they both say, I've been here forever and I just showed up, so I
know.
don't know what that
I-
means.
It's great. So we've had a lot of opportunities to move forward
This has been
and
so much fun.
and make changes and do creative things with these programs. So our goals tonight are to give you some updates about the Advanced Academics and Mentoring Program, the AMP program, as well as our Magnet Gifted and Talented program, and then also to talk about recruitment, retention, and how we are working to reach underserved populations in the district. And we have a couple of next steps as we go through some of these pieces as well.
And to start out this presentation, one of the things that we wanted to be able to provide to the board is some context of how we use a specific assessment to identify our students. It is called the Cognitive Abilities Test, shorthand for COGAT. So whenever you see the COGAT reference, it's an acronym, and that's what's this specific assessment. Unlike academic measures, it is intended to measure reasoning abilities. There are 3 domains that it's intended to measure. Verbal, which is most commonly associated with literacy skills, but also it's called in the literature sequential reasoning. So like whenever you're hearing something and you're visualizing something in your head, the idea that a story has a beginning, middle, or end, if that's how you think and that's how you organize information, you would be a high verbal learner. Quantitative, which is most commonly associated with math, but it's also associated with the way that we can utilize the language of numbers to be able to make meaning. This is where charts, graphs, people who prefer to show their learning in that kind of way would do very well. And then nonverbal, which is commonly considered our spatial reasoning. So those are the people who like to draw pictures or models or build pictorial representations of their learning. They tend to be strong nonverbal learners. And so as you can tell from that description, it's not inherently the same thing as academic success. There is some overlap, but it is not intended to measure academic success. It's intended to measure thinking skills.
Which one of those people would be the best parallel parker?
I would say a nonverbal, which is I would say it's my strength, but not someone else's.
I don't know why I always wonder about that, but I think somebody said that at a conference once. The first program that we're going to talk about is the Advanced Academic and Mentoring Program, and this is an enrichment program that students are invited to participate in throughout the school day, in their week, at their school site. So these programs exist at every one of our schools, every one of our elementary schools, and they are really being developed under Dr. Parsons' mentoring to help create academic identity and recognition in all of our students. So they are a flexible grouping to help bring in students in these 3 areas that Dr. Parsons has just described and provide them with opportunities to really shine in areas that they enjoy or that they have an aptitude for.
And so just an update if you're not aware of the staffing model for AMP and also the work that we've been doing to modernize and further evolve the program. It is a 0.5 FTE at each elementary school, and so if a teacher is a 1.0 FTE, then they serve as the AMP teacher at 2 schools. If they're just a 0.5, then they're the AMP teacher at 1 school. The timeline, and you know what? This is proof that I have been here for 3 years, because in the 23-24 school year is whenever I started exploring with like some early pilots of identification models. We're going to go over the identification shifts that we've been working on in the next slide. And so that was of me trying to reach out to the community to see how has the model been serving our community, in what ways can we make adjustments to that model to better serve our community, and the beginnings of some pilots. In the last school year, or this school year, as an AMP team, we decided to move forward with a full team pilot of widening identification and tightening services. That seems like, how can that happen to both widen identification and tighten services? But it's very possible, what we're talking about with the flexible model. And then every subsequent school year will be a further refinement of that, of figuring out how to be supportive of the model, to find value in all of our stakeholders, teachers, students, parents, principals, classroom teachers. To talk about that identification shift, the prior AMP identification, and not to call you out, Board Member Jensen, but I do know that you were a teacher at an elementary school, so you are very familiar with the old model, and so you can just nod your head right along with me. But the way that it was is that we tested our kids at the beginning of 4th grade, and then we waited for the data to come in, and then we set one static group based upon their results. Because you do get 7 different subscores when you give all 3 domains. And if you noticed, that overall composite of VQN, verbal, quantitative, nonverbal, is what we identified from. And that one static group that was identified was the group that carried from 4th to 6th grade. That caused some barriers of implementation. If we're testing kids at the beginning of the year, waiting for the data to come back, setting the groups, it means that we have a delay of services. And so one of the things that we did was, first of all, shift the testing to happen at the end of 3rd grade. So then once the kids come back in 4th grade, we have the data in hand, we can make groups, we can get started as quickly as possible with the kind of enrichment services that our kids need. Another shift that we made group-wide this year is, instead of having one static group, we have 3 groups based upon those 3 domains that I talked about earlier. So we look at our scores, we filter them based upon the verbal results, and we identify a verbally strong group to be able to provide verbally strong enrichments too. And so that's where, again, capitalizing upon that utilization of sequential thinking. How do you apply that to mathematics? How do you make that even stronger in literacy? Those kinds of enrichments. Same thing with quantitative students. And as you notice in verbal and quantitative, because I pointed out that they do tend to align with some of our academic areas in comparison to nonverbal, In the state of Utah, we cannot exclude children based upon their academic scores, but we can include them. And so what we've tried this year is looking at things like how did students do on the verbal section of the COGAT, pick some of our top scoring verbal kids, but then also look at our top scoring literacy kids and see, is there anyone that we missed that would also possibly benefit from this enrichment as well. And so again, that's a utilization of how we're including kids appropriately and legally, but being able to acknowledge that someone who's great at literacy may not want to go to a math enrichment. And that's totally fantastic. We want to see that diversity in our student population, that diversity in thought. Same with the quantitative section, where we do have the opportunity of then also looking at the site level. How can we provide some inclusion space using math scores? Both quantitative scores on the COGAT and the math scores that are provided at the site level. Nonverbal doesn't have that comparable assessment because of the spatial reasoning. We don't tend to academically assess that. But there are many studies that show that nonverbal, and our data supports this, that is a high scoring area in our underserved kids. And so that's a really great opportunity to have really positive conversations about these are the kinds of STEMs, what do you see in your students, who do you think would be a really good fit that maybe wasn't on their A game the day they took the test. And so then they have that inclusion opportunity. And then further, one of the things that is added in, if time permitting, is that the AMP teachers have, if they have space, talent development groups, which is based upon student interest or other data. Examples of that are the Teller of Tales competition, where it was who wants to sign up, who wants to give that a go? And we were like, welcome, come on aboard. The book club, I put club in quotation marks because it's not inherently a club, but it's an AMP teacher who has provided reading time during ELD minutes. So while some of our ELD 1s, 2s, and 3s are getting their language development services, he went out into the classrooms and said, hey, here's the book that we're about to read. Who wants to come read this with me? And some of our kids who still need English language development, but not in the same way as some of our multi-language learners were like, sign me up. And he was actually able to get a group of 16 5th and 6th grade boys to sign up to all read a book together. And so then they had this really great time reading a book together. And then he repeated that cycle. That's what I mean about how we're using data, but also soliciting the idea that students' opinions and students' desires have a place in the educational decisions that they make for themselves, and we are here to be supportive of that. So that is, if you can tell, the essence of identification remains, but that's what I mean about widening identification, narrowing to be able to provide more targeted services. We get to look at the group of kids in front of us and provide very direct services based upon how we identified them with multiple groups.
Just a little bit of the statistics that we have in our AMP system. I had a follow-up question about what our percentages look like compared to our overall district percentages. So if you look very small there, it's larger for you, I hope. The small number following the percentage is the district percentage. And so our AMP programs include from 5 to 15% of the students in a grade, 4th, 5th, and 6th at every school. And that has a lot to do with the size of the school. Sometimes there are some other physical limitations if the classroom is smaller, if the classroom is larger. But overall, and especially with the flexible groups Dr. Parsons has just described, we are really trying to push that up into that upper 15% or perhaps even more further, especially with the open access programs that are being provided to students. Again, so that we can help students create that positive academic identity that having the opportunity to be in an enrichment program can bring to them. The groups that we have here, generally our AMP groups average about 25 to 30 students in a grade at a time for 4th grade, and as we move this up in some schools through 5th and 6th grade, those groups continue to get larger. So looking at our overall populations, we have a couple of groups that their student count is very low. We are continuing to work on outreach and inclusion to make sure that we have all of our students represented, but as you know, if the number is less than 9, we don't include that in a public report. But in looking at whether or not we are moving toward matching, our goal is to have our special programs match the demographics of our district as a whole, across the board. That is the goal. And as we continue to look at that historically and nationally, we know that certain groups have always been over-identified or more identified based on this. And so using these new identification methods and really increasing that outreach, we are beginning to see in the first year of this program a move toward greater matching of many of our demographic groups in the AMP program. So we'll keep an eye on that over the next couple of years. I think those are the numbers to watch as we move toward matching those two demographics.
Sorry, before we move to Magnet, I had a question about what those AMP numbers mean. Are you talking about just students in a group or any student who participated? Like if I did storytelling, am I counted there or is that only group
In
members?
in these percentages, it's just the identified children, like who we flagged in Power School as receiving AMP services. So it would be the kids in that V group or Q group. Our open access ones, considering it is as we're exploring, figuring out our time and space within a 0.5 FTE while still providing identified services as per USBE, they are not being flagged in Power School right now. We're just documenting them at the site level to be able to celebrate it in those ways.
So you're doing even better.
I know, we actually are, and we're gonna continue to do better because the feedback I've received overall has been generally very positive. Like the AMP teachers feel excited to know more of their school community, and they can see how their job has actually become easier because when you have a group of students that need something specific and you give them that something specific, like, it fits. And so hopefully we'll get even better as we keep on trying.
Dr. Parsons and Dr. Hall, I have Amanda with a question and then Board Member Bate.
Yeah, if you're okay with me jumping in now, I'll jump on the Ashley bandwagon of let's tackle AMP before we move on to ELP. So bear with me. So I guess the first question I've got several, so I apologize, I'll try to move quick. On the COGAT, like how precise is the COGAT testing for K through third? Like,
The validity and reliability of the COGAT does peak around 4th, 5th grade, like at the end of 3rd, and then the peak ends at 6th grade. And so for our younger grades, the validity is still, like, if I remember correctly from the last time I checked the manual, still like within an acceptable range to be able to be used for them for that grade. Otherwise, the company would pull that assessment if it reached like a really low reliability level, like a 0.5, like 50% or something like that. But as we know, assessments for younger kids are always very difficult. No matter the assessment, the COGAT is no different, which is why we utilize the COGAT both in kindergarten and 3rd grade to be able to capture whenever that peak begins.
and then I guess part of that would just be hopefully you're kind of looking at that in alternative ways instead of just relying on a data point that's not necessarily reliable. Secondly, my other question is, it's great that you've got these AMP staffing 0.5 in all of the elementary schools. I actually was not aware, so I guess as parents in these communities, first point of contact could be the principals, but how else is this actually being, I guess, marketed so that parents even understand that this is going on to help our kids excel versus just generally expecting the general supports, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, I'm not going to overly belabor the point that communication on a very large scale is always going to be very difficult and at any given point. Things that we do to help elevate, that we have started to do to help elevate the presence of the AMP teacher is now that we do district-wide testing for kindergartners and 3rd graders, those families are all notified, like they don't need to sign up to take the COGAT anymore, which is something that was started about like 3 years ago as well. And so they get notified of the assessment. We also have a beginning of school year flyer that we provide to all of our schools to be able to distribute in whatever packets they send home, understanding that our parents are experiencing a deluge of flyers whenever it's the beginning of the school year. We do advertise the difference on our website. That's one of the reasons why I personally was like, no, we need to talk about AMP first before we talk about magnet, because I do feel like we tend to have a magnet first, AMP second kind of conversation, when in reality the dispersal of services is thanks to the AMP team and the hard work that they do. The AMP team members also participate in their school level committees. Like I have multiple AMP team members who are on their SIC or participate on their SCC. There are some of them who are teaching at the school that their kids are at. And so it's a variety of things similar to any other, like when we look across the entire district, the kind of engagement that we see across our teachers. And yeah, anytime I have something really big, I do try to send it to Yandri and her departments to be able to add it into Peach Jar. I believe that our middle school testing was just pushed out, and I really appreciate their department and the advice, feedback, and help that they gave us to retool our website to make it more clear the different services that we're providing, the different facets of services that we're providing.
Thank you. Nate, may I have one more, sorry?
Yes.
And then I'll just wrap it up. But basically, you know, I like what you're saying where you're kind of looking at, like, you can't exclude, but you can include. It's phenomenal. I guess my bigger question is the individuals that are doing these evaluations and identifying potential students that could be participating in these, going into students with disabilities, how, what training is being done to ensure these individuals even understand how to consider the student population, especially the more complex ones, like that may be nonverbal but have very high skills that could really like have benefit for this, because sometimes there's that tendency of, I just don't know how, so I don't consider them. Or they're special education students, so I don't consider them. So maybe you don't have that answer, but that's something that really and it will be a repetitive thing that, you know, when you were talking in prior board meetings before I've even been on the board, this will be a repetitive question essentially is, what are we doing to actually make this be accessible and approachable, and these kids being considered in these different programs, because these kids, even if they're extremely complex, have great skills. So
I think that that's a very reasonable question. I think that I'm going to give you a synopsis, and if you want to know more, I think that I'm always available. Well, I'm not about to be always available, but I'll be very available in the soon future to be able to have a conversation about this in a study session if that's what you're interested in. I actually think that the question that you ask is fair, and I think that the amount, like the perception, the feelings, the belief, the knowledge base around gifted and talented and advanced academics is a slow burn for people who have not spent a lot of time thinking about it and how to understand that also, like, students can be seen for individual things within them. Like they can both need a lot of help in something and really shine in something else. Like an example of that is at one of our schools, a student who scored so well in the quantitative version, but she is not a good reader at all, and she's in 5th grade and she hasn't been a good reader since the beginning. And for me, that embedded learning in the moment from that particular team member to help them see how to navigate those conversations with the different people, to be able to have an open heart and an open mind about what that student does bring to the table, considering we do like to think of mathematical understanding and literacy as very entangled. And that student has been participating in the quantitative enrichment. I have heard informal reports from both the AMP teacher and the site principals that her attitude about learning has changed, like who she is, like for the rest of the day is now different, just because we were able to give her that chance to see herself as something more than just someone who can't read. And that's the power of this, but it is a slow burn. And part of it is even figuring out that nuance of the difference between all of the different domains and the different talents that exist out there, and how do we unbraid those to be able to even look at those before we even start with how to accommodate or modify our instruction. And my team, I am very proud of my AMP team. They have worked really hard. They have understood from the beginning whenever I've shown up that we are on a learning journey together. And we spend a lot of meeting time together, thinking about this, sorting through it. I'm not going to say that the problem is fully solved, but they understand that priority, and they are critically examining their job in a way that I'm very happy with, to think about how to help the students in front of them be seen.
And to add to that, I would say I really appreciate Dr. Parsons, because she came in to challenge that and to really, as our department as a whole, have been working with the special education department over this last year to really begin to see where are the questions we need to ask. What are the ways that we need to think about inclusion as the first step, that all students are at this level, and then we decide, you know, where do we go from there as a next step for all of our students. And you came in armed with an armful of research articles with print this big, and I don't think that department sort of knew what hit them for the first 18 months, but now that is really a part of their conversations in challenging that culture and that bias around that's on the other side of the hall. You know, we don't go there. And we all of the halls and all of the students are our halls and our students, and that's.
And even understanding our role in, we're the ones thinking about this, how do we help other people in the building who haven't been thinking about this think about it as well? And that's another step in this journey. So again, that was already too long of an answer, but we have been well thinking about that, and I have even more details if you're curious at a different time.
The public appreciate it as well.
I am. Board Member Bates?
Dr. Hall, Dr. Parson, thank you so much for everything you're doing. You know, I really appreciate it. Of course, as I'm looking at these numbers, I look at the blacks and indigenous communities. That mean we have less than 9? That's why.
Less than 10. So it could be 9, who knows? It's a number. What I can tell you is it's not 0 and it's not 10.
Okay, so it could be 1. All right, so of course, my question will go to the same. I mean, you know, looking at the total and not being able to have, you know, 10 or more, it really is disheartening, I would say. And I'm just trying to understand what is it that we are doing to make sure that these groups, you know about, not only know, but also soliciting them to enroll their kids in these programs. That's one. And two, is there a new way we are doing things, or is it still the same way of advertising the information and outreach? And so I'm just trying to see if we have changed a method of doing outreach, you know, looking at the numbers that we have here.
Yeah, and you know, I would always say that I agree with you. Until we have comparable percentages, I'm not going to be satisfied either.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we have been doing to help is that we have been working on examining in what ways do we make parents do the lift for us in comparison to us just doing the lift for them, which is why we do grade-wide testing for kindergarten and third grade. We notify parents, we give them an opt-out opportunity versus an opt-in, which is what we used to do. And when we identify kids, in comparison to years past where we required like this chain of parental consent. We let them know this is where your child is going to be receiving an enrichment. If you don't want that, let us know. If not, we're writing. And we're going to give them, like, based upon the data, the service that they deserve. And we give that to them with plenty of notice, both through a handout or through Parent Square. We've been utilizing all of the comparable communications that our district has been doing to create those parallels for consistency with our parents. And I think that that's part of that ongoing conversation. I would say that for those specific two, if I went out anecdotally to my AMP teachers and said, like, these numbers are low, they would probably push back and say, it's dependent upon what they log in PowerSchool. Come to my classroom and see, and you'll see representation of the school inside my classroom. Of course, I can't go with that. I go with the numbers that PowerSchool provides me. But I do think that they are very mindful of the impact and the power that they have whenever they recruit students in a positive way, of saying, of like reaching out to students, having those conversations with teachers of, this is what I'm looking for. Where do you see this in your classroom? And being able to be that proactive advocate for children, not just providing an identified service, but being an advocate for their school location. And that's something that I've been stressing, that I can hope that as we move forward in that direction, we'll see these numbers change. Now, this is not a comparative of last year in comparison to our magnet numbers on a later slide, and so that's one of the reasons why we don't see the shifts. And so I do want to acknowledge that. But even then, if we use magnet, the shifts in magnet demographics, and think about that progress that we could be making in AMP that aren't represented in this slide, then we could be hopeful that next year these numbers are going to be even better.
I think there are two other things that I have heard just as I've walked through AMP classrooms. When the AMP teachers are recruiting students for their talent development groups, you know, when they're talking to teachers about what kinds of students they're looking for, they're not just saying, you know, give me your good
best.
readers that have been, you know, reading Harry Potter since kindergarten or whatever.
Who are the ones that make you happy?
Yeah, who are the ones that make you happy? Let's take those away from you. No, but it's, you know, who are the ones that have the really good negotiating skills? Who are the ones that can, you know, talk a group into really doing something that they want? So they're beginning to phrase it in ways that don't necessarily sound academically the same, right? It's not, so it's not just reading Harry Potter, but who can figure out that business plan and really sell a business. That is a completely different thing. So teachers are beginning to expand the way that they look at their students and say, okay, now wait a minute. This is not a student who likes to read like I like to read, but they certainly have this verbal skill or this ability to process charts and graphs and information like that quickly and then do something with it. And so that might not be framed in the same academic language. So that's a teacher-driven way. I think the second thing that I see coming up as a result of both the talent development and the shift to really saying to kids, you don't want to read Harry Potter?
Yeah.
That's okay. Today, for the next 6 weeks, we're doing robots. Is that there has been an attitude sometimes, and I won't say every student or every school or every teacher, but sometimes the kids have thought, and I know this because my own nephew said this when he was in 4th grade, why would I want to go in there and do more harder work? Like, that doesn't seem very fun to me. I am not interested in participating because I'm going to go in there and they're going to make me do more of this stuff that I already don't care for that much here. But now, when it is going to be fun and exciting, now all of a sudden I think that there's some of that self-advocacy or that willingness that we're going to, again, be seeing really make some changes over the next couple of years, because that classroom is now the place to be, not where, you know, a certain group of kids go and then they're going to read quietly together because isn't that fun?
Oh yeah, so much fun.
So
yeah, an example of that of the first point that we'll get a good laugh over and then we'll move to magnet is a AMP teacher who had been filling out some get to know yous and one of the students at her school wrote, like, to the prompt, "What are you good at?" And one of her students wrote, "I'm really good at talking back." And of course, yeah, yes, our kids are just great. I love them. And of course, like, she had come to me and been like, what do I do with this? And I'm like, well, being really good at talking back is not a bad thing. It's just how she's choosing to utilize it. The student is choosing to utilize it. That's the misplaced thing. And so let's think about, like, all the places where a good comeback is exactly what we want to need.
And the confidence of that student
Yeah.
should be encouraged and enhanced.
Yeah.
And not, sit and be
Yeah.
still and don't make history.
Yeah, and especially considering that student, I then learned, is actually very good at talking back. And so,
Okay.
so
All
yeah.
right, now we're going to talk back and move right on
Yep.
to Magnet. Again, our Magnet program is our full-day program. We have 3 sites and 2 sites in a changeover position. In a Magnet program, nationally, we're looking for about 3 to 6% of a population within an area to be identified for that. And this is to really help meet those specific needs of those students.
A reminder of our program model for Magnet. We do have, I'm going to go from the bottom and work up. We do have 2 locations that are phasing out. That's our Nibley Park program that is our Magnet DLI combo. They currently have grades 1 through 6, and we're going to be phasing out 1 grade per year. We've stopped recruiting for that program, and the kids who are receiving that service are going to maintain that service until they're done. Washington is also phasing out. Right now, they currently have a 5th and 6th grade. Next year, they'll only have a 6th grade, where we did not recruit for that location this year, for then the program to be done the year after. And what is new is our area model. So our 3 Magnet locations for elementary are Whittier, Indian Hills, and Edison. And what we did to help with the communications with families who, again, to that idea of how much burden do we put on parents, where we would say, hey, you qualify for Magnet, where would you like to go? And it's up to the parents to do that research and that lift, to be able to provide the most prescient and the quickest information. That area model will help us in the future with assignments, so parents know my student is qualified, this is where I'm from, this is where I'm pointed, and then be able to make a decision from there. And the feeder elementary schools for each of the 3 locations are provided on that slide. So for example, if your student is currently a Rose Park student, then when your student qualifies, you know that you are headed to Edison. And especially for our underserved populations, that was a really positive change because they would just know that something happened, but they wouldn't know where to go. And then all of a sudden they'd show up at Whittier and Dr. De Leon would be like, hey, Alex, why is this kid, what am I supposed to do with this student? And I'm like, oh, that's a great question. They qualify, so register them. That's what you should do. And this way it provides a little bit more consistency, a little bit more streamlining for our parents in our community. It's also the standard with our neighbors, specifically like Granite to the south, Canyons, and Davis.
So we're
While
going
you're digging into this, sorry, just for clarity for the public, your title is ELP, and then it says Magnet Gifted and Talented. Just for the public's clarity, that's the one and the same. It used to be ELP, and it changed to Magnet Gifted and Talented, correct? So
It used to be Magnet ELP, so it was MELP, but then it was also Neighborhood ELP, which is NELP, which is very clear, very, very well articulated. And so ELP is the name of the overall department, and Magnet Gifted and Talented is specifically the full-day service. AMP is the enrichment at each elementary service to provide a little bit more differentiation between what they do and why they do what they do.
So those are kind of.
Yes, and the Nibley Park ELP DLI, we left for historical names. That's what we've called, because they've always had that slash in their titles. So as they phase out, we just love that. Thanks.
Thank you for that clarification.
We're going to go through Magnet identification. Oh, I'm sorry?
One more clarifying question, is AMP a pullout program? It is, so it used.
I mean, on a more
Back in the day,
complicated-
it was the neighborhood
The
ELP.
neighborhood ELP,
Yes.
Where they pulled the students out. Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Now, keep in mind, the answer is a little bit more complicated. It depends on what's needed. Pull-out is for the older grades, what we tend to do to have those small group enrichments. There's also, for our younger groups and our discovery groups, there tends to be a little bit more whole group push-in to be able to provide some of those basic thinking skills to our youngest learners. It's a little bit different depending upon the school, the needs, the size, the bandwidth within a 0.5 FTE teacher. But essentially, yes, it's the pull-out, the part-time pull-out.
All right, we're going to go over magnet identification very quickly and talk about some changes that we've made for the future.
Yes. In prior years, as I've said, we did district-wide kindergarten and third grade assessments. We are still continuing to do that. And students who met a set criteria were invited, regardless of enrollment capacity. This caused quite a few problems. The first concern is that it tends to have a fluctuation of over-identification in some areas and an under-identification in others. To do well on a COGAT, you have to be ready to do well on a test. And so that does cause discrepancies in identification and leaving some of our talent behind in some areas. And as we said from two prior slides, if our goal is 3 to 6%, sometimes up to 20% is a little excessive in some of our hotspot areas. Another concern is that it provided a lot of hang time of communication with families. Like, we would reach out, then they could sit on it, they could reach out, which is great, but it also means that principals can't make decisions about their buildings. We can't communicate to teachers about the class sizes that they're going to have to be able to prep for. Parents want to make informed decisions about their children, and those class sizes is a big part of that conversation of knowing what they're walking into. And so it left my department looking like we're withholding information that is making it harder for everyone to make decisions, when in reality, we're trying to give some more opportunity for parents to come and go as they please. And so that was a concern that, especially last year, was very obvious. And we want to be responsive to our community. We want to be responsive to the feedback that we receive. Middle school magnet, if students are qualified for elementary magnet, then they can head on to middle school magnet. We also provide testing for kids who haven't been invited if they want to give it a go. We also have honors classes at all of our middle schools so that they don't have to get a qualifying score on a COGATS to have a high rigor class. They can sign up for honors science if they want. And so that is our middle school identification structure.
So looking at that, or coming off last year, I asked Dr. Parsons to research the other options that districts are using to make sure that they're supporting timely and consistent identification practices and communication. And so moving forward, we're going to be using a model that is kind of the same structure that Davis and Granite and Jordan and Canyons, the districts on the Wasatch Front, are most commonly using.
Yes, I'm very appreciative of the collaboration that our neighbors have been able to provide to us. So as I said, we're still going to do district-wide kindergarten and third grade assessments, especially considering, as pointed out, that third grade assessment isn't just used for magnet, it's also used for AMP, and so it's actually a very vital resource for us. And then what we would do is we would look at the top scores of each area and then invite students up to the set enrollment limit. So for Edison, we would look at the kids in the Edison area, identify the top kids in that area to join the Edison location. Same with Whittier, same with Indian Hills. And then we would create a wait list of the next following kids, because as I've always said, I've said it many times to y'all, so this is going to be a broken record. Our attrition rate is pretty substantial for people who opt in to magnet. And so, of course, that wait list would be needed to be able to maintain a reasonable class size while still allowing some breathing space for that attrition that we experience every single year of people who have qualifying kids but love their neighborhood school, and I'm very supportive of their love of their neighborhood school. So then as students opt out, that as they're invited and they opt out, then that wait list would be then populated to try to maintain a class size in that magnet classroom. Our new to district students, so if they weren't with us for kindergarten and third grade, we're still going to continue to assess them because we want to make sure that they have a comparable opportunity. We don't want to punish them just because they weren't enrolled with us in third grade. And by then, though, when they're new to district, we already have a classroom running, and so then they would be populated appropriately in the wait list because essentially the invitations have already been sent and we've already been moving on. Middle school, no changes. If you've been invited, you're invited. If you want honors, you have honors. If you want to take the test, you have the test available to you.
So statistically, a quick look at our magnet programs. The first chart, the top chart, are our classroom sizes crossed at our magnet schools. And the last column is the overall district classroom size, just so you get a comparison. Some are a little over, some are under. You'll notice that we have a small fifth grade classroom in Edison listed there. At the end of summer, we had an acceptance of 10. We did have a very short recruitment period for this program last year. We feel like this year having more time to recruit for that, more energy to spend on that, that will help. At this point, the fourth and fifth grade class have been combined, so that is a fourth and fifth grade split at 15. So we do not have a class of 5 out there. That is what's happened there. A couple of statistics of note. While we are still looking, Board Member Bate, at our students who are Black and Indigenous and Pacific Islander in our magnet programs, the Hispanic, or the number of Hispanic students has more than doubled this year in identification. The number of low-income students and the number of students who are English language learners have more than doubled from last year to this year as we continue to work on that identification process in ways that make the most sense for students. So again, this is not our final answer. We will continue to work on this. Our goal is for our program demographics to meet our district demographics. Statistically, in terms of magnet performance, we're required by legislation to tell you that our magnet students achieve well.
Yep.
And have over time, and there we are.
Yep.
Programming updates statistically at the middle school. These are, we have programs at Clayton, Hillside, and then West has a 7-8 program at their school. So there are our numbers. West is our larger program of the 3 of them. So those are our participants, but as Dr. Parsons have said, we also offer a lot of opportunities for students who want to take an honors class or to push into some courses in other ways to make sure that they're fully enriched during middle school. Yeah.
Hey, Charlotte, we're actually going to, in the interest of
Okay.
time, we're going to hold
Okay.
questions till the end of the presentation. Thank you.
They've figured out that if you ask us questions in the middle, we don't count that as time and we just talk. Okay. Recruitment, retention, and reaching underserved populations.
Yes, I am going to acknowledge that I've already included components of this, and so our feelings about our inclusion efforts are well established already in this presentation. And I would attribute those feelings of seeking inclusion specifically to the way that we're examining identification and the way that we're trying to pair services to that identification. It's allowing opportunities for a student to be good at something and not good at something else and still deserve an enrichment in that area, and to be able to explore that nuance of each individual human being. Also, with our inclusion efforts we've had multiple students from our hub, specifically, mainly our hub behavior classrooms, who have qualified for both AMP and Magnet. And again, as she's pointed out, as Dr. Hall's pointed out, we've been working very hard with our SPED departments to be able to figure out the most appropriate balance of both services, like acknowledging that the students need both. And so what is the most appropriate venue to be able to provide? How do we provide those supports so students can get both?
And meet our legal requirements around our IEPs and our 504s.
Absolutely.
So that,
Absolutely.
and that is a balance, and it's a lot of conversation, and we appreciate the special education department really reaching out to have those conversations with us.
Yes, and I would even say that applies to our students who are multi-language learners as well. They deserve their English language support while also deserving an enrichment as well. So this isn't just a SPED versus ELP or gifted talented conversation. It's with all of our special services. How do we make sure that our students get to see themselves in a variety of ways? And we've made great growth this year towards that.
Okay. our new program.
Yes,
Edison.
let's talk about Magnet at Edison. As Dr. Hollis pointed out, we had a short runway, because I don't know if you remember this time last year, but I had a few months to get once the decision was made to get a program up and running, while also helping multiple programs move. And so I would say that to help our underserved students see themselves in that runway that I had, 79 students identified with a 75% participation rate. Great statistic. I am personally giving myself a pat on the back for that one, on top of everything else. From those 79, 58 made it and are currently enrolled as we speak. Those 58 have been, we have continued to identify kids since then. 79 is just the number that we closed out the summer with, especially now that people are aware of the program and are able to see the things that the program offers. As pointed out, though, our 5th grade is small, and that's because parents were worried about the transition between grades 5 and 6, especially if they're in the Northwest feeder area. And so, especially considering transportation is different for middle school, what to do, why am I going to move my child to one school for 1 year and then immediately turn around and move them again to then move them again? And I think that's a very valid concern for our parents. And so that's why in that 4th and 5th grade, we see those lower numbers. I believe that I invited 18 4th graders, and 8 of them came, or 10 of them came. And so that's a result of the feedback that we received about the ambiguity of middle school alignment. And so the solution that we have brought forward, that we have made, is to create a 5-6 split at Edison to be able to provide that continuity. After those students who are in Magnet for that 6th grade split, they can still go to Glendale, because Glendale will still accept them as 7th graders. But it aligns with the other Magnet opportunities outside of across our district, specifically at West, Clayton Hillside, or even the kinds of advanced courses that they provide at Northwest. And so it doesn't take an option off of the table to be able to provide that for our students. It makes it so that there's multiple options for those students who are in that program that maybe weren't bound to Glendale Middle School to begin with. The teacher who would be taking that on, she was the 6th grade Magnet teacher at Whittier for years, and so she's very familiar with 6th grade curriculum. She's very qualified and very willing. The administrative team there is very supportive. Parents have indicated that they would appreciate this to be able to understand the decisions that they're making, to be able to opt in. And as of right now, especially considering the 5-6 split would be representative of the FTE, it's a budget neutral option. And then, of course, as usual, their student achievement will be evaluated. We won't forget about that.
And you got 2 thumbs up from Ella as well.
Is it about Alco? Is it about Alco?
Yes. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then other successes. That's the numbers side of it. I would say that the program at Edison has been a fantastic success. The Magnet teachers there have understood that it is not just them benefiting from being at Edison. It is also their job to provide a benefit to the Edison community. They provide in school-wide access of supports and extensions, like during the intervention blocks, and whenever there's a student who is in the neighborhood classroom but is potentially showing signs to be ready for partial inclusion. They have those really great conversations about the entire population to be able to have this reciprocal benefit. And it's helped to start some tough conversations about what does it mean to both meet a basic education and still provide enrichments for students who are traditionally underserved in Title I settings. And so the kinds of conversations that I have every single time I come to Edison, they have an open heart and open mind, full credit. The Edison team, the administrators and the teachers are the ones who they understood the brief and they are rising to the occasion. And they're doing a really great job of, as I pointed out earlier, doing what they need to do to see their students as they are and being able to provide those really great opportunities to them. So that's the qualitative side of it. And I'm I'm very excited about all of our magnet programs, but especially considering the new ones, whenever you can see smiles and happiness instead of like franticness about being new, it's always, to me, a success, especially when the kids are happy and thriving. So.
Thank you, Dr. Hall and Dr. Parsons. I do want to note to the board and to the public that Vice President Jensen and I are trying to end this portion of the agenda, and certainly this topic by 8, so we can get on to the final discussion agenda. So if you haven't had the chance to speak yet, and you want to, we would want to move to the second round and make sure that we all have that chance, but we are trying to end this portion of the discussion, this topic anyway, by 8 o'clock.
I would say, for me, I asked one clarifying question about a slide. I didn't feel I used my first round, and I have a substantial quantity of questions about this presentation. I feel more comfortable concluding this presentation and then moving on to other business if that's what we need to do. But I think this warrants a substantial amount of discussion.
I understand that, and I think just knowing the desire to have shorter meetings, Brian and I felt, sorry Bryce, you're over there. Brian and I felt like questions that were asked during the discussion counted as the first round of questions, and we're going to stick with that. But nonetheless, if folks haven't had the chance to speak yet, I would just want to see if folks want to defer, and we can move on to the second round for the 2-minute portion. Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the 2-minute portion, the second round. Charlotte, for your first, second round, and then Ashley.
I was wondering if can I make a motion right now, or no?
I mean, you can, but knowing that the recommendation is to not have any significant decision on the topic.
Oh,
tonight,
okay.
but-
Well, I'm wondering if I liked the idea of having a study session on this topic. I'm very interested in it, and I don't know if other board members are too, but just wanted to mention that.
Yeah. Ashley?
Yeah. So in reviewing the presentation, I appreciate that Dr. Hall was able to answer many of my questions in advance. And the biggest concern I had reviewing the presentation was the per pupil costs that Dr. Hall provided for the magnet and neighborhood classrooms. And in some sites, our district is now spending $2,000 more per pupil on students in magnet classrooms than neighborhood. And I think the spending difference is an important inequity. And I want to know, first, if this identification and capping is intended to solve the problem on some level with class sizes, because before putting that question to you, I know a couple of things. And one is that this is not to say that students in magnet classrooms are getting $2,000 more of a service or books or whatever, right? It's a class size difference, and that's the cost of a teacher. And I know Dr. Hall will also be quick to point out that the extended learning program budget is now considered distinct from a school's basic staffing, which perhaps did not used to be the case. But I additionally want to clarify that this is all coming from the same big WPU bucket as general education. So if we've separated out the budgets, the money is still coming from the same bucket. And I think it's not funded in an alternative way, like a title program or a state grant. So I think it's really important that in this meeting we clarify whether these changes are intended to close that gap, and also discuss as a board what other steps we need to take to ensure equitable spending, because I certainly think we should continue offering gifted and talented services, and Magnet is one part of that. AMP is obviously a really growing part that's very important, but I question whether students in a Magnet classroom really deserve an investment of $2,000 more than their peers in neighborhood classrooms. And to that end, one of the other questions I have is about this decision at Edison. I expressed to Dr. Hall that I know there's a body of 5th graders at Edison who transfer to Franklin at some point because they do not want to start middle school early. And this is something reported by that teaching team. And so I'm wondering how we're providing a solution for one group, but we're not able to respond to the neighborhood group.
So I'll take the first question first, which if I'm hearing that you would like in a study group to study some different models for providing gifted and talented services that are not a full-day magnet program, we are happy to bring you in a study session some ways that would be not a 3-school full-day pull-out magnet service model. If that is the concern of the board, that this model is no longer the one that you would like to support. I believe that is a study session. That would take some more conversation. We're happy to have that conversation. The second one, we have not had that same report that there are students transferring to Franklin. And in fact, when I looked at the data of the number of students who are in the Edison boundary that are at Franklin, there are twice as many students that are in the Franklin boundary that are at Edison than there are the other way around. And while I don't have a number, if they are all in the 6th grade, I would assume that because that is a K-6 school, that those 11 students would be throughout several of the grades. So I cannot respond to that, as I have no data that substantiates that that is what is happening. So I apologize, but.
I could follow up with the remainder of my time. I think it's important we talk to teaching teams about that, because that's what they're reporting. And I think based on Edison's class sizes, it could really be all 11. And we also won't ever capture in those entries without just asking the teachers, because there are students who are certainly enrolled at Edison who may not live in either boundary and may be there from kindergarten through 5th grade and then still transfer to Franklin because they recognize the feeder pattern. It's not what they wanted. To the point about the study session, can you just respond to the initial question, which is not, do we change the model? It's, is this cap on classes intended to bridge what is a big spending gap?
No. If you would look at the difference in size between classes. So, for instance, some of our smaller magnet classes are in our 2nd grades at Whittier, Nibley, and I know that Nibley is phasing out, and Edison, and they are smaller than our average district sizes. But we also have some that are larger. So really what we're wanting to do is be able to make those identification commitments sooner so that parents have the information. We do believe that that will help increase the number of families that might say yes instead of, while they're waiting for an answer from us, make other decisions or choose alternate paths. But it is not a way of saying, this might help bring us toward a mean so that we don't have a class that might be substantially larger than either our district average or any other classroom in the magnet program, and to improve the speed that we're able to allow families to make decisions. So the answer would be no.
I think that the combination of that answer, of the answers that she's given to your question, is that magnet is a service model amongst many, and the cap is intended to, or the cap identification, instead of the way that we did it before, is intended to create a little bit more clarity around the procedures to figure out how is magnet still continuing to serve us. Because again, as Dr. Hall pointed out, we have wide variety of classroom sizes, even within the same program and location. And so, like, in some ways, we need to ask the question of, should we try to force magnets to be a certain size just to make it financially responsible? Or should we be a little bit more shrewd of, how is it serving us? And so that's why the answer is no, is because we're trying to clean up some of our procedures to be able to be a little bit more intuitive of the way we answer these questions.
Bryce, this will be our last question for this topic.
Yep, and I'll be really quick. I initially had a question and a comment. Now it's kind of 2 comments. But my initial question was similar to Board Member Anderson's with the Edison Franklin. I think you've started to address that. Maybe that comes further with a study session and some more data, so thank you for that. The second piece, I just wanted to express gratitude for the Edison Magnet Program. For a very long time, the residents of the west side of Salt Lake City have asked for something like that. I'm very appreciative and grateful, and I think there's work that we can still do around that. The other thing I was going to say is something that I was hearing around this time last year and over the summer was the concern about where do people go for 6th grade, and I appreciate that that's starting to be thought about, so thank you.
Thank you.
And to your question or potential motion there, Charlotte, if you want to submit an agenda item request for a study session topic to Brian and I through our formal processes to get agenda items on the agenda, we would welcome that.
Okay.
Thank you. We'll end discussion on this topic.
Excuse me, may I ask a question that's a point of clarification? If Charlotte asks and receives a second in this meeting, that complies with the formal request, does it not?
I would assume that it would, but a formal email documentation would be beneficial for Brian and I.
Okay.
Thank you. Moving on, Superintendent, the floor is yours for the final discussion agenda item.
Thanks. I'll ask Sam to load the PowerPoint there. I appreciated the chance to speak to the board this last week in small groups and individually about this proposal for district department reorganization. The board has asked for this proposal, and so I'm pleased to have had a chance to give that and to provide a plan for moving forward. I also want to mention, and this I shared with the board, first, I want to be able to provide, if I could, this presentation all at once. And the reason why is I know there are people in the district who want to know what my recommendation is. And so I'd like to share that with the community, as well as much of the reasoning as we can fit in here in the conversation behind these changes. So if you don't mind having questions at the end, also based on your early feedback, changed a couple of items in this proposal. So just want to share those with you that are a little bit different than we talked about. Simple changes, but I think important. So I want to start first, Sam, if we could at the next slide, what's guiding the principals here. And I know, board, this is a refresher for you a bit, but I think it's important for the community to hear because this affects people's placement in the district, and I know a number of folks are interested in the background of this as well. So first is our understanding that our core work is about teaching and learning, and it's about school leadership. These are the features that make up what we do in order to be successful as a district, to get initiatives done. We must focus on teaching and on leadership from the district office. And so our district needs to be built around that, as well as all the pieces that we need to put together. And I've spoken since my early months in this role about the need for coherence across our district and the desire to align our systems and our processes and our resources and our expectations within the district to create more clarity for those working, but also just to make us stronger that way. There's also the district literature that shows that when you're focused on teaching and learning, certainly, but also particularly on the work of principals, because they are the ones carrying the bulk of this, and they know this, being in this position in the middle between the district and the classrooms, that they are carrying the bulk of the work in terms of our expectations of what is happening in schools. And so what I have done is focused a lot on putting programs in the leadership department because of the connection with schools, because of the connection with principals. And I argue in this that it makes a lot of our work stronger by creating those expectations. Any line of authority has within it the accountability feature of some supervisor overseeing another. It also has the feature of providing supports to those who are in those positions. And focusing on teaching and leadership, I think, creates some stronger attention to some of the pieces in our district. Next one, Sam. The other piece here is that equity is a shared responsibility in our district, and I shared this with the board when I first came in and was interviewed. This expectation I would have that equity isn't housed in just one office, but that it is an expectation of all of the departments within the organization, and that everybody takes responsibility that way. I have chosen not to reestablish to continue with the Educational Equity and Student Services Office, have largely moved those departments into the School Leadership Department. And it is because of my theory of action. And there are a couple schools of thought on this. One is that you create more attention and emphasis on equity if you create a separate equity office. And there's wisdom in that. You can signal that equity is important to you, you raise it up that way to make it part of what you're doing in the district. The other school of thought is that you embed it in your work and in the expectations that you have of district leaders, of school leaders, and that by linking the work within equity with the accountability structures in leadership, that you're actually driving it into schools more effectively because of that work. One of the big difficulties with bureaucracies is working across silos. So by embedding work within fewer silos, you reduce that friction and the difficulty of getting people working across those silos together. Also, this sense of shared responsibility. As this proposal doesn't carry on the Educational Equity Office, it still maintains a position of educational equity that I'll talk about. But it also makes it a shared responsibility. The ECAPs that we have for leaders say that equity is present in all aspects of leadership. That's already one of the expectations we have of leaders. In the same way, we ensure equitable access to resources for students in order for their success. So this is part of what we do as a district. It's an expectation of all leaders, district leaders, school leaders, that equity is part of their role in this. And the third one there, Sam, is that my aim in this is to have clear accountability expectations as well as support. One of the good examples that Dr. Taylor was giving was that we may require of the principals that they do an equity audit. So we have this accountability function about that, but we may not be providing them the supports to know how to do that, how to make that happen. So this idea of accountability with support and trust, we're trying to build trust between the district office and our schools. That comes from keeping our word. It also comes from providing the resources people need to get their jobs done and having an alignment with accountability and support in the structure of our organization and what we're doing. So trying to rebuild what I have said many times is the social contract that we have with each other. And so this idea of accountability also coming with support and then with trust matters for what we're doing. So want to mention too, before I get into the actual changes, is that there is no one single district structure. Every district has chosen their own, and even with that, they change it at times, and then there's always some morphing in this. But this has been, in studying the district now for 1.5 years, this is my view of how we organize the office to meet the challenges we have now and to more effectively, again, create those expectations around coherence in what we're trying to build across our district. Thanks, Sam. So, Educational Equity and Student Support Department would now largely sit within the School Leadership and Support Department. So we are looking to rename the School Leadership and Performance Department as School Leadership and Support, again, because we're moving support services in there, student support and school support services, as well as this focus on providing principals with support. So trying to capture that in the name. So we would move the Office of the Student Services and Counseling, including counseling, nursing, SROs, and I'm going to speak separately about SROs in a minute, and McKinney-Vento, to the School Leadership and Support Department with Director Mindy Holmdahl reporting to Executive Director Taylor. One of the things I'm excited about here, and especially after talking with Director Holmdahl, is linking the work, having the work of counseling, nursing, McKinney-Vento at the table with the school leadership department to raise those issues and make sure they're on the plates of our school leaders. So that is working both ways. So counselors will have the opportunity to speak more directly to their needs and what they need to have happen with school leaders. School leaders and that work, the aims of the district will, I believe, can be communicated more clearly with our counselors, our nursing staff, our social workers, and that are there in Director Holmdahl's office. Also, to move the Office of Multi-Tiered Systems of Support and Social Emotional Learning, including Safe Schools and Behavior Specialists, to the School Leadership and Support Department with Allie Martin reporting to Executive Director Taylor. In the same way, well, this is a little bit similar and a little different in that, again, I want the accountability structures in there. And these issues at the table in speaking with our area directors and our principals about the work. The other piece of this is that Allie's work has become so focused on safe schools and behavior specialists and the demands of the legislature around the Guardian Bill and what's expected on school safety. She's also the liaison with the school safety specialists that are part of that legislative bill, or are part of the legislative work and are certainly captured with more demands in the guardianship. So putting that in school leadership with Dr. Taylor, who is my representative on school safety as it relates to the work within schools, I think is pretty important. There was a recommendation from the board that we look at changing the title here from MTSS SEL Director. I talked with Dr. Martin and she suggested preventive services as a way to frame this department, which makes some sense to me, that we're trying to prevent poor behaviors, we're trying to prevent any safety issues, we're trying to prevent, what else would we have there that she's working on with people, trying to work with schools around their multi-tiered systems of support and their positive behavior intervention and support to put in place good tier 1 programs that serve kids and prevent a lot of behavior challenges and things. So that may be where we want to move, and I would make that part of the recommendation here. I know that we're going to talk about this again at the next board meeting. Next one, Sam. Move the Office of Educational Equity and Access to the School Leadership Department with a new director to be hired who would report to Executive Director Taylor. This, again, too, is the work of attendance, early warning systems, My Brother's Keeper, the work around Latinos in Action, all these pieces where we're trying to increase access. Again, giving that equity piece a more direct line to our principals and to school leadership, whereas where the work needs to happen at that school level. Also with this, there was a question and a good recommendation to consider. There had been conversation about moving Lorne Pinnacous's work with Title VI in American Indian education, perhaps to a different area in the school leadership department. But it originally reported to Educational Equity and Access. I think we'll keep that. I think that was a good recommendation to relook at that. I talked to Dr. Taylor. This is where I'm actually excited about the placement of equity within school leadership, is that one of the challenges with creating a separate office where you have a conglomerate of actions that need to be taken by the district. You've got all of the work around counseling and social workers. You've got the work around American Indian education. You've got the work around attendance and things. What can happen is that some of those actions are sidelined, are almost pushed to the side because they're not in the core work. They don't have access to getting in the core work. I think moving Indian education with this Educational Equity Office into school leadership grants more access to the core work that way. and I think will strengthen our ability of our schools with the supports that we provide, the professional development, the training, and things, to better serve our Indigenous community. That's an area where we need some work. And I think this actually could be a way to improve what we're doing for American Indian students. The one change would be to move translation services not into school leadership but to communications and community relations, with Bob Monk reporting to Executive Director Chatwin. This makes a lot of sense. They're already in contact, as so much of the work that Yandri leads is around our communication strategies with our community. The one thing I wanted to point out with SROs, with the increasing emphasis on school safety and how we're managing that, I'd like to suggest the SROs report directly to Dr. Taylor because of his management of that. Thanks, Sam. In a similar way of focusing on school leadership, placing special education in the teaching and learning department, I think really brings together some important pieces here, that we would move the Office of Special Ed in 504 to Teaching and Learning, and Senior Director Aaron Anderson will report to Executive Director Hall. I think this increases our, I'm glad to hear that, Amanda. I actually think one of the challenges we have, as any of us will recognize, and you in particular, Amanda, will recognize, is inclusive education, which relies on general ed teachers and their knowledge of and comfort with special education and working together in special education push-in kind of situations rather than pull-out situations. So the teaching that goes on in special education, I think, will benefit by being in the teaching and learning department. I think the teachers in general ed in particular will benefit by having special education there, and the professional development and training that Tiffany's office provides that way. I'm excited about what we can do this way. Because of the size of Tiffany's office, I am recommending we reorganize the department to create more layers of bureaucracy, which I don't often want to do, but what we're trying to do is prevent so many direct reports. Special education is a huge part of what we do. That alone is placing a lot of work. Certainly Erin carries a great deal of that, but it's placing a lot of work on Tiffany's shoulders. So in order to make her department more manageable, I am suggesting that we create some new lines of people within her department, which would mean elevating them into Director 2 positions, and then having some direct reports underneath them. So promoting the literacy director from Director 3 to 2 with 2 direct reports. Underneath that is a literacy specialist if approved by the board, and that is Monty Ike's work with refugees and world languages and alternative language services. Promoting the STEM mathematics director from a supervisor to Director 2 with 2 director reports. Those 2 director reports would be Candace Penrod, our science director, and then our science supervisor, and digital teaching and learning with Sally Warnke in there. Promote the fine arts supervisor to an enriched learning office with 3 direct reports. This is social studies with Desi Olson. It is our Audrey with our early childhood education, and the third one is our health with Katie Aramea. Would be under that one. And then because Monty Ike has taken on new responsibilities since being named a coordinator, and also is supervising 2 refugee support positions, promoting him from coordinator to supervisor. And then as suggested here, and we've talked about previously, create a new literacy supervisor position, reporting to Dr. Maloof. Next one there, Sam. There is one change here too, in that the reorganization of evaluation and assessment. This was a team that was reporting to Dr. Hall. I'd like to create 2 separate offices with a shared supervisor. We see the work as 2 different kinds of things, that there are people doing the data collection and input who would work with the IT office. They do the testing, support, and data collection. Then there's the team that does the data output in the reports, in the program evaluations and surveys, and who are putting together the Power BI structures for principals to have easy access to reports that they want for their schools, putting the evaluation and data insights team in school leadership, putting the assessment in the IT office, and creating a shared supervisor that would sit in the school leadership department. And then lastly, we have an open associate superintendent position that I have talked with you about wanting to reclassify as a chief of staff. My goal here is to increase what I'm able to accomplish, particularly around implementation and getting that done, and having somebody who can do the project management pieces that I'd like to see happen in the district, and really focusing on that kind of work, focusing more on the processes than program management that would come with an associate superintendent position. And then the last one there, Sam, just a discussion with what time we might have.
We've got a few minutes, but it's an important topic, and we'll open up the floor for discussion. Any questions? Member Anderson?
I'm going to go through this more quickly than I would otherwise, which I have to admit I think is a disservice to this discussion. My largest concern with the proposal is the perception that growing district offices rather than growing schools is really a big problem in education. So I feel that any proposed reorganization that promotes a handful of high-level administrators and adds new administrative jobs is not really what I hear the public asking for, which is a more streamlined office to shift staffing to our schools. So the cost savings of this comes out to be about 1.5 FTE. So I just want to share my appetite for a reorganization that's a little bit more radical in terms of diverting more funding to the basic staffing needs of our schools, where we have a shrinking population, but we continue to see diverse students with a range of needs, and we need to really solidify that staffing. With that context in mind, I have a question, but I have more comments first, so I'll just try to put a strong bookmark on this, which is, I've heard a lot about how this would benefit administration and reports and the layers of administrators here in the office, but I'm wondering what it does directly to impact students in the classroom positively, and what immediate benefits classrooms would see if such a reorganization was approved. A related part of that concern is with the educational equity piece. I appreciate the idea that equity would be considered part of everything, but I'm of 2 minds on this. And on the one hand, I would like to ensure there remains a voice for student services on the executive cabinet, because if we claim to be a student-centered district, I'm curious how we could do that without having a department leader who would speak directly to student supports in the given structure. And on the other hand, if we collapse some of those structures systematically, I'm more comfortable doing that if we see a greater cost savings that gets reinvested directly in services for students. So to reiterate, I think saving 1.5 FTE is not enough to pass more support to school buildings and risk losing that important voice on the cabinet. The last topic I'd raise is my concern about assessment. The first is that I'm concerned this change was made to assessment already prior to the board's approval, and then that decision was paused while the rest of the plan came together. So I want to present a scenario that I hear coming up since this assessment move has happened. If a principal has a question about an assessment, they would have previously reached out to the department director. But since that job hasn't been filled this year, there's been kind of tension in my interpretation of the scenario between 2 halves of assessment. There are analysts who can prepare reports but may not know about the components. And then there are staff who are versed in the assessment, but they're no longer in clear communication. And it creates the potential for inaccurate reporting in our schools and them not having timely information to support students and have discussions in PLCs. So again, I want to circle back to how the change in assessment has given direct benefits to students compared to the prior model. The last thing I would offer is that I think we have a lot to learn from our peers as we go through this process. Most of them take a long time to decide on a reorganization, others as quick as 4 months. But I think we could also learn from our peers in Provo. They rolled out their recent organization in 2 phases and had a very good public-facing idea about how that would go out, so people knew what to expect. I think if we establish some of these decisions in phases, we may be able to learn from some of the, shortcomings or concerns we have, or phase it out in such a way that we could make really effective decisions. So again, I can go back to what my questions are, but for the sake of time, I said it all at once. I'd prefer to go back and forth and, have some more of those questions answered.
There was the one question that I think you highlighted there, Ashley, about the effect on schools. I think this gets back to that conversation about the core work of what we do, which is the teaching and learning piece and the school leadership piece. What I'm trying to create within the district is a way to get the work into the classrooms. I mean, that is the purpose of creating this kind of structure, is to get the work into classrooms. I believe that our students will be well served by having student services connected to the work of schools, rather than in a separate office, which has to ask permission to work with the school leadership department, and again, cross that silo. So when we're talking about accountability, it is making a simplified accountability structure for what we ask for from our principals. And the other half of that is the support, which is we're providing them the training, the professional development, the connections with our directors who are running these departments to get better at providing those services in schools to students. So to me, it is about creating that in schools. It's not about trying to simplify my life or simplify the executive director's lives to serve their work. In fact, I think I have made some extra work for a couple of our executive directors, but rather that we're trying to create what is the great gulf between a district and the schools. We're trying to shrink that gulf by creating these lines that I think have more presence. In talking with people just quickly to let some folks know about these changes before presenting them publicly, they said, I like the idea of bringing my office and the concerns I have to the table with school leadership and having that part of the regular conversations that happen with the school leadership team. So in that way, I actually see the benefits of creating it this way.
Amanda?
I guess, let's see if I can word this. So in general, I support this structure change. I mean, from conversations, it sounds like you've spoken to your staff to understand different perspectives and how this structure would be beneficial for how the district office should better serve our student populations. I agree with Ashley, and that would be nice to be able to put more money into the schools, but if we can increase our effectiveness as a district office, then that benefit has its value in different ways. And obviously tonight, we're not going to be approving the org chart. This is not a finite, we're not ending this conversation tonight. I think that this presentation is great because now the community is seeing a little bit of it. Hopefully we can kind of push out a actual structured org chart picture so people can see how that lays out, so the community can provide their feedback, the teachers, the family communities, et cetera, so that when we bring it back to a board discussion, we've got a more well-rounded input into this and the concerns before we finalize. But I mean, simply put, I see your vision and I strongly support what you're doing.
Thank you. Any other comments in this first round? Charlie?
Maybe, so you've talked to your department, some of your staff,
So all the senior
cabinet.
staff, the executive leaders, and I spoke to just a handful of people who would be moving offices. I didn't get to everybody that would be moved with those offices, so
Okay.
I was in, I'm not able to do that. I asked them to share this with their teams, so
Okay.
there'd be a little heads up on this before it went public this evening.
Okay. And have you, yeah, I think that it would be good to have a more public, a little bit, broaden the public engagement on it. I don't know. Or maybe not public, but the schools, all the principals and maybe some of the teachers who would be, who are doing the work of, you know, this. And
I encourage teachers and principals to weigh in on this over the next couple of weeks before we meet again, and to share that with me, if that, or with board members.
Okay.
Certainly with their desires this way. There are a couple pieces to that. You know, we have a structure so that leaders are over their departments and have some ability to structure their department to get their work done in the same way principals are over schools and have some ability to structure their schools to get work done. I would submit that a superintendent with cabinet has an ability to structure the department to get the work done. I'm not, I do want to hear from people. I think their perspective is the perspective from the position they're in, rather than the perspective of looking across the district at what is valuable across the district and how we're trying to align all the resources and services and systems that way across. So looking at some of that. Are there other questions over there?
Brian?
Oh. Okay, sorry. Did you have some other thoughts or?
So this is saving, this reorg would save the district.
I think we came to it about,
yeah.
it comes in under budget, so I'm not adding to the budget.
Uh-huh.
I am adding one position, a literacy person, but also removing an executive director position. So not really increasing the size of the district office, making some changes across that way. There were also a couple of, let's see, there are an administrative assistant position that we're not rehiring for in that.
Charlotte, Brian?
I appreciate Amanda's comment about the charts and that sort of thing. I think that is another way to engage. Well, we have a lot of visual learners out there, and I think that helps a lot of people. I appreciate Ashley's comments about Provo, and maybe when we get into this next phase of discussion, we can look at, I don't know if you have examples, Ashley, or, but you know, how that was done so that we really do vet this or whatever and make sure that we've looked at everything. The one concern that I have is that, and I know that I've expressed this to you before, Superintendent Grant, but the Chief of Staff, when we hired you as a superintendent, one of the things that I was anxious about, and that's when I was a new board member and had joined the board and had seen that we had had a situation where there had been a number of superintendents, and what I was anxious to avoid, or at least prepare a mechanism to ensure continuity in superintendents, was having that associate superintendent, and I'm not saying that that individual has to be the next superintendent, but I think it's a really valuable piece to be discussing, where we have an individual who is working side by side with you on that level, who, well, heaven forbid, if something were to happen to you, I certainly would never want that to happen, but I mean, things do happen. And to me, that's part of this conversation in reorganization, is how do we provide for that succession piece. And my understanding, when we were visiting with you and appointing you as the superintendent, was this is something that we need to have in place as well, is the associate superintendent and that succession piece. So, and you know what? I forgot to push the time button on me, and I'm sure that I'm almost, so I'm done with my time.
You're 10 minutes over.
I don't think I went.
If you want a round two, just put that nod in there.
Okay. Are there any folks that want to speak in this first round? Okay, we'll move on to round two. Board Member Longwell.
So, to your point, Brian, in regard to whenever you hired Superintendent Grant, I wasn't here for part of that, but from my understanding, there were, and I've seen it, there were parameters put in place with the expectation of an associate superintendent position to accomplish what you guys were all seeking. What I sought out after this agenda was posted was what is in the job description requirements of a superintendent. And what's the licensing requirements, what's the experience requirements and all of that. And to me, basically the way to accomplish that chief of staff position, or really any person that is eligible to be considered for that, and it can be the chief of staff, is ensuring that we are requiring the correct credentials, experience, licensing that gives them access to do what you're wanting. So it's less about the title, more about the job description and the licensing and education and all of that stuff that opens up that ability to fulfill that need. Does that make sense? I feel like in a lot of the conversations, we get stuck on the title when it's really about what are we trying to accomplish it, and ensuring that that job description of that person is fulfilling that need, which I think Superintendent Grant has expressed in different conversations. Essentially, she's wanting that person that can be side by side and do all these things that we're wanting, but we're accomplishing that step-in role through what's required in the job description. So.
Amanda. Ashley?
Yeah, I would speak to the same topic. I am supportive of what Brian had stated, and I think the board had unanimously agreed at multiple intervals that an associate superintendent is what we were looking for. To Amanda's point, the reason why there would be a pay difference in the reorganization draft presented to us tonight is because the job description is not the same. And a person who would go for a chief of staff role is not the same as what an associate superintendent fulfills, and I'm not comfortable approving the reorganization in any form without an associate superintendent.
As I expressed in our conversations together, and I think this is true of Salt Lake District. Salt Lake District has never elevated an associate superintendent into the superintendency. So associate superintendent roles have not typically been that. And it would be a person that I would hire, and I don't know that you want to elevate the person that I would hire. I think you want to elevate the person you would hire into that role. Also, as we discussed, that succession planning, I mean, I would love to come to an agreement on the succession planning that was able to fulfill both of our needs in this role, rather than just the succession planning needs. But there are senior leaders in the district, particularly Dr. Hall and Dr. Taylor, who are in the positions that you would look to for succession planning as a board. And those positions, as well as other senior leaders in the district that we would look at as the bench that we'd want to draw from over time, are important to consider in this as well.
Any other comments in the second round? Felina?
Sorry, just to clarify for myself, is this, I guess, a defined role, although it hasn't been fulfilled, or is it still in the process of being established?
Which one? The associate superintendent and chief of staff? I'm proposing a new role, which is Chief of Staff, that has not been, it's not been called that, though there have been people in the district who have served in that role in a Chief of Staff sort of function where they're doing a lot of project management work rather than direct line authority. Associate superintendents have typically been used to oversee some programs, like overseeing teaching and learning or something like that. I'm proposing something different with this. So there is an open position now for an associate superintendent. I would still want to define that role and probably not use an old job description for that since the world has changed since we last filled that. But have not brought that forward of what that would look like as an associate superintendent.
Okay, but there has been one in the district in the past.
Yeah, there are often two of them. Actually, what's awkward about this too is that our executive directors in the district used to be called as associate superintendents too, particularly those over school leadership and teaching and learning. The change was made to give everybody the executive director title, which is a little bit unusual for districts. Usually those are an associate or an assistant superintendent role, depending on how the districts kind of create and structure the organization.
Hey, can I make one more comment, please?
Let me make sure that nobody else, Charlotte, and then,
Could we get a job description for the chief of staff?
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
That would be helpful.
I can share that with you.
Associate superintendent?
I don't have one developed that I've developed, so I'd be really hesitant to, I mean, I could. It would take me a little time to develop that. They would look rather similar. One is more senior in rank than the other and how I sort of see the way I would like to establish the office.
Maybe
And-
just the way of the other for that would help people better understand the differences and compared to how other individuals in the district can also apply for that position or.
Mohammed?
And I know our district never had a chief of staff, but I think it is, I personally, trust Superintendent Grant, that she sees the organizational chart, she knows what she wants to happen within the district, and, it is worth giving it at least a year to see, if it works, great, and if it's not, then Dr. Grant will have the opportunity to reevaluate, if we should keep that position or put in an associate superintendent. That's, and personally, again, it's not the title, it's more the responsibilities that individual is gonna have to make sure the mission of a student achievement plan is taken care of. And that's my suggestion there. Thank you.
last comment, Bryce?
Yeah, just one comment. I hear what Mohammed, I hear what you're saying. I also mostly support this proposal. I do think there's value in continuing the discussion and hearing from community members as well. I did want to just address one thing that you said in regards to maybe giving it a try for a year. I'm a little concerned about creating a position just for a year.
Okay, that's fair.
Anyways, I just think continuing the conversation is good.
That's great.
I'm gonna, thank you, board. I'm gonna go ahead and call the discussion right there. We do have to move on. We have a few action agenda items that we gotta get to and to reconvene our closed session as well. So, but just so the public knows and so you all know as a board too, this is on our agenda for our next board meeting as well, where we can continue the conversation. And if you have other questions for Dr. Grant, please filter those her way between our two meetings. Moving on to our action agenda, unless there's, are you good with that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Moving on to our action agenda, we had two items pulled from the action agenda. Item number 2, which is the board meeting minutes from December 3rd, 2024, and item number 5, the joint educator evaluation committee member request. And so Amanda, I would open it up to you or to any other board member to make a motion so we can have that conversation.
I would like the motion separate is my first comment. So if somebody wants to make the motion for the board minutes, let's handle that separately, please.
Works for me?
I move that we accept the board meeting minutes from December 3rd as posted on the consent agenda.
I'll second.
All right, got a motion and a second on the table. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll start with a roll call vote, starting with Vice President Jensen.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Amanda Longwell abstain.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Charlotte Fife Jefferson, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Okay, that motion carries. Entertain a second motion for the second item, item number 5.
I make a motion to help me with my motions. My goal is, let's move it to the next board meeting for discussion, not the consent agenda, so that the JEEC conversation can be discussed more than just a consent, especially for the sake of time tonight.
If I move to approve it now, are you comfortable discussing it on the motion as permitted by parliamentary procedures?
Sure.
Okay, I move that we accept the Joint Educator Evaluation Committee member request as posted on the consent agenda.
Got a motion, is there a second?
Can you clarify what you're asking for?
I'm moving to approve it as it was posted. Amanda has a discussion she'd like to provide about it. And so I'm moving it so we can proceed, but she still has the chance to comment whatever it is she'd like to comment.
Second.
We got a motion and a second on the table. I'll turn the time over to you, Amanda, for the first round.
I guess my comments regarding the joint, let me read it out, Joint Educator Evaluation Committee is basically, do we need to make this decision tonight? I did reach out and it does have it does meet the minimum requirements as far as equal number of parents, teachers, and administrators. It doesn't necessarily have a good cross-section of our district as far as throughout the district and different representatives of different student populations. So I'm concerned about that. It is newer, so it's something I'm not going to be hung up on this time round, but as we progress with this committee, something that should be worked on to ensure that it's really done with integrity. Those are kind of my two main points is if we're going to do a committee, if we just focus on the bare minimum, then we're actually missing out on an opportunity to do right for our students and the intention of the item. So I guess those are my comments.
Any further discussion to the motion to approve that particular item? Amanda, thank you for your comments, but I'm going to call it for a vote. So we'll do a roll call vote, starting with you, Amanda. You're next on the list.
So Amanda Longwell, I'll vote yes.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Charlotte Fife Jefferson, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Just to note, Amanda, I want you to know that we've recorded that request. I know that you connected with Nate Elkins on that, and so with Logan Hall here as our HR director too, that as they're putting it, and I think as our team generally across the board, your request to make committees more conscientiously reflect more populations in the district is a good recommendation, so thank you for that. I just wanted to let you know that didn't just land in nothingness, but actually lands with us, so thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. And Amanda as well. Our next item on the action agenda is our board meeting structure. I think it's pretty clear which direction we'd like to go, and I'd entertain a motion.
We also have our committee assignments, so I would actually move that we accept the study session model as discussed, and also the committee assignments as amended by Alan.
I'll second.
Any discussion to combining both of those agenda items, which I support too? Seeing none, start with a roll call vote with Board Member Williams.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Charlotte Fife Jefferson, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Yes.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Amanda Longwell, yes.
All right, that motion passes. We are nearing the 9 o'clock hour. Is there folks that have significant reports that they'd like to give, or could we move past that? And okay, we'll go ahead and do our normal structure. Just we'll keep it pretty brief and quick as we can. Charlotte,
No.
Mohammed, and then.
I just want to mention one thing. The president just rescinded the special status that schools had for safety for students who are undocumented, so that ICE may enter our schools. I want you to know that our legal team is working on some information with our communications team to share with our community. Undocumented students are still deserving of the right of education and are not to be prevented from getting an education. And what this means for our schools, we hope is absolutely nothing, but also just want to share with our community that we ask parents who may be affected, families who may be affected, to make sure they are providing emergency plans and emergency contacts with their schools. And that they encourage them to reach out to nonprofit organizations for further information and community organizations. And then just to let our teachers and our principals know that we'll be sending further information. We are restricted, of course, with this move in what we can do, but we will share information about how we expect our community to handle things that may come up. So I just wanted to let everybody know, since that change was made today.
Mom, did you have a report?
Well, on that part there, thank you, Dr. Grant, for letting us know. You know, from an immigrant to other immigrants, I understand, and I feel your pain, because you come to this country so you can live the American dream and give an opportunity to your families here and back home. So that they can be taken care of. It is so sad to see such things, you know, happen even within our education system. Those are kids, they deserve equal education, and God, you know, their parents sacrifice everything that they have so that they can make sure their kids grow and get a better education and take care of their parents. And I just want to let every immigrant here know, and everyone in our schools know, that they are in a safe place. Please, please, I beg of you to reach out to each of your board members, because this is just so unjust. This is not what represents this country. This is not what represents the country for immigrants. And this is not what represents exactly the words that are said in the Statue of Liberty. This is a country for people from all walks of life. And my heart is just absolutely shattered and disgusting what I'm seeing happening right now.
Thank you, Mom. Brian, did you have a report?
You know what, I'll keep it really brief, because I know that what I'm going to do here is just, I was the USBA representative. I'm not anymore. I can see that everyone is getting the email, but I just want you to be aware that there is a JLC meeting on Friday the 24th, okay? There is also a meeting, and I'm kind of just winding this down, but I'm just letting you know that there's also, you can go the night before to a Zoom meeting. You can see all of this in your memo. We talked about the importance of JLC, and then finally there's, and I'm telling you this because we're not going to have another board meeting before this. Yeah. And that would be USBA Day on the Hill. And they really have asked us to support them in that, and you can get your details in the memo. It's on the 27th of January. And thank you to all those SCCs out there that I've been visiting and your hard work.
Student Board Member Helena? Ashley?
I'll be really quick. Because we still have a student in the audience, I wanted to share that many students came to speak to us several meetings ago about the maximum fees and issues they were having with competitions and trips. And so I talked to Alan about that and wrote up kind of a summary of how some student clubs have had a lot of success leveraging foundation support to solve that gap. And that is going to be in the Greater Avenues Community Council newsletter, so that students who are living in the Greater Avenues will have that response, but I'll also try to publish it on my social media and try to give a better explanation to students who reach out to me about how they can solve the problems that they presented to us several meetings ago. Also, congratulations to women's basketball at West, who is currently an undefeated team.
I would have waited to bring this up, but I did make a commitment to the teachers at Rose Park Elementary that I would briefly address this. So I had a meeting with them last Friday. There were about a dozen teachers that I met with. They just shared a number of things that are going on in their profession and their life, concerns with some of the legislative things that are coming forward, but also some concerns about not meeting the diverse needs of students in our West Side schools. I did let Superintendent Grant know that I had this meeting, and I'm working to find a time where I can meet with her one-on-one to address the concerns, and then from there I can bring those to the board as a whole. But I just wanted to thank those dozen teachers for spending a couple of hours with me last Friday, and they did ask me a couple of questions that I'm still pondering on, and wanted to let them know if they are listening, I'm still thinking about those questions. Thank you.
And
I'll cut it in half. We should be commenting again the Genevieve Curtis celebration of all of the levity that we've been dealing with, like the Genevieve Curtis, that was well run, well done. The family was just very grateful for that opportunity to come together, massive showing, so well done, all that accomplished that. And I would be remiss not to comment about the Hillside students passing. That is just, I can't even imagine what that family and that community is going through. Anytime I talk about a child or something passing, I can't. But I wanted to share the principal's comment when I reached out to her from Principal Janelle Rodriguez. She said that I'm thoroughly impressed with our Student Services Department with their support from the moment we reached out to notify them. Sorry. They were able to send support immediately for our staff, coach me through the steps, and send documents on steps and things to do. They also sent a crisis team of social workers to Hillside today to support students and continue the process of support. With this being my first incident, I have felt 100% supported and guided. For that, I thank you. So for all those that helped accomplish that support for that school, obviously her wet words express it better than I could ever. Thank you.
thank you, Amanda. I'll keep mine very brief as well. Vice President Jensen and I, along with the superintendent and SLEF Director James Yopius, had the opportunity, along with a few members from the SLEF board, to attend the NAACP Dr. Martin Luther King luncheon yesterday to celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. King. It was a wonderful event. There was a lot of great representation throughout our community and state. Scholarships were awarded. Recognitions for law enforcement officers were given out as well. We had a great speaker who joined us as well, and it was really fun. The connection for me, obviously, having followed and living by the tenets of Dr. King and the modes of nonviolence through persistent struggle that we've all had to engage in over the years. There was a salient quote that I actually keep in my home and read every day when I am getting ready for the day, which is: a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And with that, I would seek a motion to enter our closed executive session.
Okay. On January 21st, 2025. Oh, I move that the board return to the closed executive session to discuss, 1, the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual, and 2, pending or reasonably imminent litigation, and that the board adjourns immediately upon the conclusion of its closed session.
I second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote, starting with Board Member Charlotte.
Charlotte Fife Jefferson, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Amanda Longwell, yes.
Bryce Williams, yes.
That concludes our public meeting. Thank you, everybody, for joining us in person and online.